For more than a decade, she's only been known as Jane Doe from Opelika. She has a name and she has a story, a very horrific and sad one.
On January 28, 2012, residents of a mobile home in Opelika, Alabama, found the remains of a little child in their backyard. No one knew how it had gotten there, and detectives would be mystified for more than 10 years until advanced DNA technology unraveled a family secret that no one was supposed to find out. So, what exactly could have happened to the poor innocent child? And how did her remains get to where they were found? Today's case will take us to Opelika, a city located in the east central part of the state of Alabama. It is the capital city of the county of Lee and boasts a population of more than 30,000 people. Opelika is famous for the Robert Trent Jones Grand National Golf Course, which has been the venue for several national and other important golf competitions. Apart from this, the city is also popular for its vibrant art scene, historic downtown area, and other scenic tourist spots. Amore was born in Virginia on the 1st of January 2006 to parents Sherry Wiggins and Lamar Vickerstaff. At the time of her birth, her mother Sherry was only 20. Lamar, on the other hand, was in his mid-30s and was a military man serving with the Navy. She was a blessing, she was smart, and she was special, and that's why I named her Amore, which in Spanish means love, Sherry said of her daughter. Soon after Amore came into the world, Sherry's and Lamar's relationship took a hit. Something that made matters worse was the fact that Lamar's relatives had frowned on his romance with Sherry from the start. And when their affair eventually produced a child, they had more cause to be displeased. They were simply disappointed that Lamar now had a child out of wedlock. With the growing tension, Sherry had no other choice but to take Amore and move out of the apartment she and Lamar shared. This was in 2006. She began to take care of her daughter on her own and got little to no help from Lamar with maintaining their daughter's well-being. Shortly after this, Lamar got married to another woman and moved on with his life. Sherry was hurt and decided to drag Lamar to court in order to at least get child support from him for Amore. But things didn't go as planned. Sherry had some legal troubles of her own, and this proved to be her undoing. At that time, I was making some bad decisions and some bad choices in my life where I did have some run-ins with the law. Due to this, the court system labeled her as unstable and decided that Amore would be better off in the care of Lamar. In addition to this, the court also directed Sherry to begin paying child support to Lamar, since he was to begin caring for Amore. And so, in 2009, when Amore was about 3 years old, she permanently went to live with her father and his wife, Ruth. It did make sense for her to be somewhere more stable, Sherry said. Even though Amore had been taken away from her custody, she ensured that she played an active role in the little girl's life and would occasionally visit her at Lamar's residence. However, this soon came to an end. Lamar was transferred to Hawaii by the Navy, and he had to move there with his family. Due to this, Amore was now even farther away from her mother. Sherry was saddened by this unexpected occurrence, and over the years, she went to court to try and regain custody of Amore, but it was all to no avail. At some point, she was told she could no longer appeal the case, and this meant that Amore would continue to remain in the care of her father till she turned 18. I felt like they made me feel so bad about myself. I kept trying, and the doors kept being closed. I felt like the best I could do was live out my financial obligation, which I never stopped. I felt like one day I could tell her, I never gave up on you, and all I could do was take care of you financially, and that is what I did. If I couldn't do anything, I could care for my daughter by supporting my child financially, Sherry said. Despite how everything turned out, Sherry kept hoping that one day she would see her child again, but sadly, this would never happen. At around 10:47 a.m. on January 28, 2012, the Opelika Police Department received a call from a resident of a mobile home community located at 1775 Hurst Street in Opelika, Alabama. The call was about a discovery that was strange and disturbing. The skull of a human being had been found outdoors. Police officers quickly jumped into their vehicles and made their way to the scene. When they got there, they were met by the person who had placed the emergency call. The individual was a woman named Yvonne Johnson, and she wasted no time in explaining to the officers that her son had been the one who found the skull in their backyard. According to Yvonne, the skull had not been there a day before, and its sudden appearance had been startling. After she told them this, she led officers to the back of the mobile home to see for themselves, and true enough, lying on the ground in plain sight was a skull. It was quite small, and they could tell by just looking at it that it was a child's. In addition to this, officers also noticed that it had a few strands of hair on it. Its presence there was odd, and officers could not help but wonder where the rest of the body was. The area was quickly secured and detectives were notified. When they got to the scene, they immediately did a sweep of the mobile home community. The aim of this was to see if they could find any more skeletal remains, but nothing turned up. With the day getting dark, detectives were forced to give up their search for the day. It wasn't until 2 days after the shocking discovery that detectives were able to locate some human remains. These were found in the woods, several feet away from where the skull had been found. Detectives also found a pink long-sleeve shirt with ruffles and heart-shaped buttons alongside the remains. All of these were collected and then sent to the lab for forensic analysis. Finding out the identity of the child shot to the top of the list of priorities for the detectives. Forensic analysis and autopsies were performed on the remains at an FBI laboratory located in Quantico. There, it was discovered that it belonged to a black female, and she was speculated to have died between 2010 and 2011. Her age was estimated to be between 4 and 7 years old, and in addition to this, the medical examination also revealed something chilling. The deceased girl had previously suffered several broken bones that were already healing before she died. Her bones also indicated that she had been malnourished while alive. That was not all. A fracture was also noticed in her left eye socket, and this made detectives believe that she had been blind in the left eye. They speculated that this facial deformity would have been obvious to anyone while she was alive. In the end, her death was ruled a homicide, and detectives immediately began an investigation. They had no idea who she was, but they were determined to uncover her identity. Since they could not tell what name she had been given, they decided to call her Opelika Baby Jane Doe. Since that day, Baby Jane has been part of our OPD family, said Opelika Police Chief Shane Healy. One of the first things detectives tried to do was develop a DNA profile for the deceased girl, but the conditions of the remains made this impossible. When this failed, detectives began to review thousands of school and birth records, but their efforts yielded no result. There was no record of any missing child around the age of the deceased girl, and no one came forward for a long time to provide any useful information about her. Things would remain silent until 2016. That year, a forensic artist from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children was able to come up with sketches of what Baby Jane might have looked like before her death. The sketches showed her dressed in a pink shirt with heart-shaped buttons. This was similar to the clothing that was found near her remains. These sketches were then released to the public with the hopes that someone would recognize her. Several weeks went by after this and nothing came up. But when they least expected, they got a very crucial piece of information from someone. This was in September 2016. The individual who came forward to provide the information had been a former Bible school teacher at a church known as the Greater Peace Baptist Church. The church was located in Opelika and was less than a 15-minute drive from where the skeletal remains had been found. According to the former Bible school teacher, she had seen a young girl back in 2011 who looked like Baby Jane. The teacher told detectives that the girl had looked slightly unkempt and had been unable to communicate fluently with other children, and because of this, she had mostly kept to herself. When asked if she remembered the girl's name, she told them that she didn't. With this information, detectives went to the church and took a look at the photographs that had been taken back in 2011. After going through several photos, they came upon the picture of the little girl that had been described by the teacher. Detectives could immediately see that her description fitted perfectly with that of Baby Jane. She had an obvious deformity in her left eye, just like they had speculated from examining Baby Jane's remains. The photos that were obtained from the church were a bit blurry, and so they had to use special software to enhance them. These photos were then released to the public. The following year, detectives employed the help of the University of South Florida to perform a procedure known as isotope testing on baby Jane's remains. This method involves analyzing the number and type of isotopes present in a sample, which can provide information about the age, origin, and composition of materials. After the test was done, it was discovered that the deceased girl had a higher amount of lead in her system, and this indicated that she may have been raised in Alabama or somewhere in the Southeast. Everybody has a certain amount of lead, and it depends on where you are raised, what type of drinking water you've had, said Opelika Police Captain Jonathan Clifton. Several months went by after this, and detectives had nothing to go on. However, they never relented and were determined not to leave any stone unturned. To them, the case was like a black cloud that loomed over the community, and solving it was sure to bring a sense of fulfillment. In January 2022, the Opelika Police Department partnered with Othram Laboratories to carry out advanced DNA testing on the remains. They had not been successful in carrying out a DNA test on the bones in the past, but they believed that advances in the world of forensic science would make it possible. They were very difficult skeletal remains to actually create a profile from, especially the kind of profile that you need to do genealogy, said Kristen Middleman, Chief Development Officer at Othram Labs. The lab used a unique technique known as forensic-grade genome sequencing and was able to finally extract DNA from the remains. After doing this, the DNA was then used to build a profile for the girl, and it was then uploaded to the database. With this in place, detectives sought the help of a renowned and experienced genealogist by the name of Dr. Barbara Ray Venter. Over several weeks, Dr. Barbara and her team, Firebird Forensic Group, worked round the clock to try and identify close relatives of the deceased girl using the DNA profile that had been created. Their hard work eventually paid off because in October 2022, they were able to determine who the girl's father was. It was a moment of joy for detectives because they had finally made a discovery that had evaded them for more than 10 years. It was a large piece of the puzzle that had finally been resolved. As for the girl's father, he was none other than Lamar, the naval officer who fathered a child with Sherry back in 2006. Detectives would not know until later that baby Jane was actually Amore, Lamar and Sherry's child. When detectives did a background check on Lamar, they discovered that he was still alive and was in the process of retiring from the Navy. They also found out that he was stationed in Jacksonville, and they decided to visit him there to inform him about the death of his daughter. In December 2022, detectives traveled to Naval Station Mayport in Jacksonville. They hoped that Lamar would provide them with details about his daughter. However, this ended up not being the case. After they met Lamar, he was strangely unwilling to talk about the little girl and avoided every question thrown at him. This immediately raised suspicion in the minds of detectives, but there was nothing they could do at that point. The meeting with Lamar did not go as expected, but this did little to discourage detectives. Instead, they intensified their investigation and also discovered that Lamar had a wife, Ruth. They eventually met with her, but just like her husband, she provided no helpful information. However, she told detectives that she had no idea who Lamar's daughter was or who the mother could have been. Detectives knew from that moment that they had to find out who the little girl's biological mother was. Dr. Barbara and her team got to work once again, and soon they were able to determine that the woman they were looking for was Sherry. It was also discovered that she was living in Maryland. Detectives traveled down there, and during the course of the meeting they had with Sherry, they got to find out a lot. She told them that she gave birth to a girl back in 2006, and she had named her Amore. However, she expressed shock upon hearing that Amore had been dead for more than a decade. She explained to detectives that she had lost custody of the child to the father, Lamar, and when Lamar moved to Hawaii, she no longer had any contact with her daughter. When she had reached out to Lamar, his response had been cold, and he had warned her not to call again. During the course of all this, I would still reach out. I would reach out via email over the years, and they would block my email accounts, Sherry said. I called Lamar's number that I knew to be his, and he told me that if I called again, he would block me from his phone, she added. She continued to call, and Lamar stayed true to his words by blocking her, and at some point, he even threatened her with the police. Despite the fact that she had not laid eyes on her daughter for years, she told detectives that she continued to pay child support and had till the end of 2022. To back up her claim, she showed them documents that contained detailed information about the child support. The shock written on the faces of the detectives was quite visible after Sherry finished telling her side of the story. They could hardly believe their ears. After getting back to their base, they began to reach out to the school boards as well as clinics located in the states Lamar and Ruth had resided in after they gained custody of Amore. By doing this, they were able to discover that Amore was never enrolled in any school. There was also no record to show that the couple reported the little girl missing. This was all the confirmation they needed to know that Lamar and Ruth had something to do with her death. On January 17, 2023, the couple was arrested in Jacksonville and held at the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. Lamar was charged with felony murder and Ruth with failure to report a missing child. 2 days after this, a press conference was organized, and Opelika Police Chief Shane provided in-depth details regarding the case. He also expressed his gratitude to all those who had contributed in one way or the other to ensure that the case got solved. The level of dedication to this case I have never seen in my entire career. To see a group of men and women come together searching for a name. Many of us said that we did not want to leave our time at this police department until we had her name. And now we do. Amore Wiggins, Shane had said. Sherry, on the other hand, remains grateful to the detectives for their dedication to the case, and she wants to see justice served. She was just a baby. They deprived her of everything. She was a child, Sherry said. At the moment, the case remains open, and detectives continue to gather additional information in regards to Amore's relationship with Lamar and Ruth. Lamar's and Ruth's fate also remains to be determined. Amore certainly suffered terrible abuse and neglect before her death, but thankfully the long hand of the law has caught up with those involved in such an evil act. It's still yet unknown how Amore died, but how do you think that happened? And to what extent do you think Lamar and Ruth contributed to her death?
On an early summer day on July 23, 1991, a horrific discovery was made by construction workers off an embankment of a southbound lane of the Henry Hudson Parkway in Manhattan, New York. The disturbing discovery was of a naked and battered body of a female child inside a dirty picnic cooler. Was she a victim of a pre-planned murder, or had someone gotten rid of a dead child in a hurry using that place? Manhattan, New York. With the densest population, Manhattan is geographically the smallest of the 5 boroughs of New York City. Situated on one of the world's largest natural harbors, it is mostly made up of Manhattan Island. Other than its cultural offerings and iconic scenic beauty, the city is known for its towering skyscrapers, including the Empire State Building, neon-lit Times Square, and the theaters of Broadway. Even with such a reputation, the Inwood area of Manhattan became a subject of grim headlines after the discovery of human remains in the summer of 1991. On the early summer morning of July 23, 1991, the New York City Police Department of Washington Heights, 34th Precinct, received a chilling call regarding a gruesome discovery. 2 construction workers were repairing a southbound lane along the Henry Hudson Parkway, about 40 miles off of Dyckman Street in Manhattan, New York, when they noticed a foul odor from the wooded embankment area off the road. The smell only grew stronger and eventually led the construction workers to a blue and white igloo cooler. After finding the source of the overpowering smell, the workers began to open the lid of the cooler. When they discovered a few cans of Coke, underneath those cans there was a black plastic bag that contained what seemed like human remains. When the NYPD detectives approached the scene, at first glance, they were not sure if the remains really belonged to a human. This was assumed given the fact that the place was used as an illegal dump site where people often dumped their waste along with deceased animals. However, an inspection of the garbage proved otherwise, as the skeletal remains were quickly determined to be human. Inside the garbage bag, the young female child was lying in a fetal position, with her hands clasped together, bound with rope and a cord from Venetian blinds. The decomposing body was completely naked and bloated. In addition to the Coke cans, the garbage bag was also surrounded by water, which the investigators suspected to originally be ice. They estimated she had been dead 6 to 8 days before the cooler was found. They believed she was dead for a week, and the hot sunlight not only melted the ice, but popped several of the cans, causing soda to leak out and destroy forensic evidence, such as fingerprints and DNA. The body was then taken to the medical examiner's office for an autopsy. Although identifying the body was impossible due to the level of decomposition, the autopsy result brought out several significant details regarding the cause of death and the physical characteristics of the victim. The coroner determined that the child was either white or Hispanic and aged between 3 to 5 years. She had long, wavy dark hair, which was pulled back in a ponytail. The child was also believed to be extremely malnourished, weighing only 28 pounds, which was quite low compared to children of her age. The report also indicated that the young girl had been sexually abused and died on or about July 18, 1991, as a result of asphyxiation. Without a doubt, the findings suggested that the little girl was regularly tortured before her short life came to an abrupt end. Unfortunately, no other clue was found that could lead to the identification of the poor child. Clearly, the NYPD detectives were landed with the daunting task of not only identifying the victim, but also tracking down her killer. In the neighborhood of Inwood, Manhattan, which was considered to be a place of rampant crimes, this crime stood out as a symbol of sheer brutality. In an attempt to crack this case, the NYPD detectives tried out every tactic they could possibly think of, from distributing flyers to urging the people to come forward if they had any knowledge about this Jane Doe. Police tried everything, but came up empty-handed. The murder received plenty of attention from both the police department and the media back then, and investigators had every reason to believe that someone would soon come forward with information. And people did come forward. In the initial phase of the investigation, countless tips came in. One of the tips included a call from a woman that came in just 6 days after the remains were discovered. The caller, who did not identify herself, said on a Sunday in July 1991, she was going to a wedding, and from the toll booth of the Hudson, they saw a Hispanic man in fleece and a Hispanic woman in heels walking north on the parkway with a picnic cooler in their hand. The lead seemed legit, but did not go anywhere, and in the end, the woman denied cooperating with the police by helping them create a sketch. There were other tips, including a young female drug addict who claimed the girl was her niece, and a grieving grandmother who insisted the child was her granddaughter, both of which yielded no results. Sadly, every other lead NYPD detectives followed hit a dead end eventually. Detectives scanned through the National Missing Children databases, but nothing panned out, leaving the deceased child without a name. As the mystery deepened in the case, so did the affection of the detectives for the little Jane Doe. Since no one knew the girl's name and the cops had no way of identifying her, she was given the name Baby Hope, because by then, hope was all they had left in their attempts to solve the Jane Doe case, and they truly hoped that it wouldn't take long for justice to prevail. After a few days of investigation, an anthropologist developed an enhanced sketch based on the bone structure of Baby Hope and distributed it to the media. This was the first sketch that showed what she might have looked like, but even this effort remained fruitless. For nearly 2 years, Jane Doe's corpse remained in the NYPD morgue when detectives decided it was finally time to let her go. In those 2 years, no family members came forward to claim her, and the NYPD took the responsibility upon themselves to provide her with a proper burial with their own money. On July 23, 1993, on the second anniversary of Baby Hope's remains being found, uniformed cops from NYPD carried the tiny coffin of Jane Doe, which was led by 8 children, to the Campbell Funeral Home on Wadsworth Avenue, Manhattan. The lead detective, Jerry Giorgio, actively participated in the funeral, while his wife bought a white dress for Baby Hope to offer their affection for a stranger they only knew by death. Not only the detectives, but the community also played their part. More than 500 people from the neighborhood attended the funeral while praying for justice for the little girl. She was buried at St. Raymond Cemetery in the Bronx with the name of Baby Hope etched on her black headstone. Over the years, both the detectives from the NYPD and the people from the community periodically visited her grave and left her things in her honor. Without any solid leads to go on, the investigation into Baby Hope's case went nowhere. Although the NYPD never gave up on this case, the urgency of the case faded away underneath all the new crimes. Throughout the years, there were minor developments in the case, but it mostly remained cold. With every anniversary of Baby Hope's murder, local media in New York ran the story in hopes of refreshing the memories of a potential witness or spreading awareness of this horrific crime. The efforts always fell short, and the case remained cold. By 2000, there were many new technologies and forensic profile developments that were introduced into the criminal system which were not available back in the 90s. Seeing that the technologies were proving to be helpful in other cold cases, the NYPD attempted to utilize these techniques in an attempt to build a forensic DNA profile on Baby Hope and run it through all missing children's databases. But that effort remained unsuccessful. As technology continued to progress, Baby Hope's body was exhumed for DNA tests 2 times in the span of 4 years, the first one in 2006 and the second one in 2011. None of them proved to be significant, as detectives were still not able to unveil the mystery of Baby Hope's identity. With encouragement from the public, the NYPD reopened the case in 2013 in July of the same year on the occasion of the 22nd anniversary of the discovery of Baby Hope. The NYPD tried another round of publicity on the case. Detectives canvassed the neighborhood where her body was found, hung flyers, and distributed the sketches of the girl and a photograph of the cooler. They even announced a $12,000 reward for information leading to an arrest. Their efforts finally got a breakthrough in the case for the first time in 2 decades. After seeing the flyers, a woman called the New York City Crime Stoppers, the tip line for New York City, to share some valuable information. She shared with police a conversation she had overheard in a laundromat 2 years ago, in which a woman claimed that Baby Hope might have been her sister. The tipster also provided several pieces of information to the police regarding the woman's family. This tip led the investigators to a 27-year married Brooklyn mother of 3, Laurencita Lorena Ramirez. As investigators knocked on Lorena's door and she opened it, they were met with a shocking mirror image of Baby Hope, if she were alive then. Lorena had a striking resemblance to the police sketch of Baby Hope, almost providing reassurance to the detectives that they might have come to the right place. So, without wasting any time, detectives began questioning Lorena about her missing sister. Lorena said that she had not remembered anything about one of her sisters being missing, even her name. That was until Lorena was 11, and her younger sister, Maribel, rejoined her family after staying with her father's family for years. It was Maribel who told Lorena that she remembered being suddenly awoken by something one night. She then went on to witness her sister's body being stuffed into a refrigerator and placed into a cooler later on. She also remembered looking to the other room and seeing plastic bags placed on the ground, along with the conversation between 2 adults, which included the sentence, "She doesn't fit." However, neither Maribel nor Lorena ever came out with this information. Lorena did not even link Baby Hope's case to these memories until a few months after the anniversary of the discovery of remains, when she was watching it on a TV channel. The story was eerily convenient as far as Baby Hope's murder was concerned. However, investigators needed a parent for a DNA match, which led them to Lorena's mother. With assistance from Lorena, detectives did not waste much time tracking down her mother, Margarita Castillo, not far from her daughter Lorena. Margarita, at the time, resided in Washington Heights in Queens, New York. However, as eager as investigators were to talk to her, Margarita did not reciprocate the same feelings. She was not interested to talk to the investigators and turned them down before the investigators legally obtained an envelope that had Margarita's DNA on it. The test results of this DNA came back with the answer detectives had been searching for over 2 decades. Margarita Castillo was the biological mother of baby Hope. With tears in her eyes, Margarita agreed to talk only when she saw the DNA result and the composite sketch of baby Hope. Margarita let the investigators know that baby Hope was indeed her long-lost daughter, Angelica Castillo. After decades of lying nameless in a Manhattan cemetery, baby Hope finally got her name back. However, this revelation created more questions than answers. One of the most significant of them was why Margarita would never report her daughter missing in the first place. Claiming that she only acted that way because she had no knowledge of Angelica being missing, Margarita began to tell the investigators the story of how she became estranged from her own daughter. Angelica was born on April 24, 1987, to her mother, Margarita Castillo, and her father, Gennaro Ramirez. Despite having several children, the couple's marital life was rocky, as Margarita was scared of Gennaro, who had a reputation for being abusive. Just after a few years of Angelica's birth, Margarita and Gennaro separated as a result of their regular fights. According to Margarita, it was after one of those fights in 1991 that she took her 3 daughters with her and left the home. The next day, Gennaro called her saying that he wanted to meet his daughters. Though still angry due to his behavior, Margarita accepted, considering Gennaro was still the father of the girls. As per Gennaro's instructions, Margarita brought the girls to the house of his adult niece, where he was already present. After spending the night there, Margarita decided to leave the next day, when Gennaro had a strange request for her. He wanted her to leave their 2 younger daughters, Angelica and Maribel, with him, and take the older Lorena with her. Margarita, who was well aware of his violent nature, knew that it was not just a request, but a threat. Despite not agreeing to the arrangement, Margarita left her younger daughters with him. Margarita also said that she often visited the girls after being forced to leave them with their father and brought them little gifts. During one visit, when she saw that her estranged husband wasn't around, she asked the niece, Belvina Juarez Ramirez, if she could take her kids back, which Belvina rejected, saying that her uncle would be upset if she let the kids go. Margarita claimed that she kept visiting the place until one day the family moved, without informing her or leaving any address. Margarita had no idea where her estranged husband or daughters were. In 1995, 4 years after baby Hope's remains were found, Margarita got a call from a woman saying that Belvina had passed away. Margarita headed to the location and inquired about her daughters after giving her condolences to the deceased. Unfortunately, nobody in the family told her about the whereabouts of her 2 daughters, and she came home empty-handed. It was only later that another call from the same woman requesting her to pick up her daughter, referring only to Maribel, that she realized that there was something terribly wrong. She was then informed that Maribel was the only daughter who had been there all along, while nobody had any clue where Angelica was. Although Margarita suspected Gennaro of being responsible for Angelica's disappearance, she never went to the police to report her daughter missing. Asserting an explanation for her actions, Margarita said that since her family had illegally immigrated from Mexico and she did not speak English and only spoke Spanish, she was scared to go to the police. Though Margarita accepted her fate, never taking a stand for her own daughter, detectives were dedicated to providing their precious baby Hope with justice. They now considered Gennaro Ramirez as the prime suspect in his daughter's disappearance and murder, and a massive search began for him. Unfortunately, to this day, no information about his whereabouts have come to light, as he continues to be a missing person. Yet, some people, including Margarita, believe he fled the U.S. and returned to his home country, Mexico. When tracking down Angelica's father failed, everyone thought the mystery of baby Hope's brutal murder would never be solved until police pointed their fingers at another man. The man was none other than Angelica's own cousin on her father's side and Belvina's brother, then 30-year-old Conrado Juarez Ramirez. Juarez was a regular visitor of the home where Angelica and Maribel were living under the care of Belvina and 5 other relatives in an apartment in Astoria, Queens. Juarez had a long criminal history comprising different kinds of crime, including sexual assault. Surprisingly, his family still let him hang around the children. Based on past records, NYPD detectives wanted to zero in on this guy and went looking for him. They waited in front of the Manhattan restaurant where he worked as a dishwasher and later brought him in for questioning. Although he was asked questions regarding Angelica's disappearance, detectives still suspected Angelica's father to be the one responsible, until Juarez dropped a bombshell. After initially denying it, a few hours into the questioning, 52-year-old Juarez began confessing to the murder. He revealed that in July 1991, he was visiting his sister Belvina in her Queens apartment when one night he came back to find 4-year-old Angelica in the hallway in the middle of the night. Angelica was seemingly looking to go to the bathroom when Juarez took her by the hand into his room and she went with him. At some point, Juarez claimed that alcohol made him lose control and he tried to sexually molest her, and she started screaming. To keep her quiet, Juarez bound the little girl to the table, which was often done to her to stop her from getting food or water. He claimed that he did not intend to harm her and only suffocated her to stop her from crying. He then took a pillow and suffocated her until she went motionless. After he was done, he summoned his sister Belvina, who was in another room. Shocked by the incident, she began yelling at him before quickly deciding they had to get rid of the body instead of notifying the police. Juarez claimed that it was Belvina who gave him a cooler that was in the garage and had a conversation about how they would fit the girl inside it, the very conversation Maribel had heard that night and later revealed to her sister. After binding Angelica's hands and feet, Juarez stuffed the lifeless body inside the cooler, almost in half, and placed Coke cans over it so that it wouldn't look suspicious. The pair then hailed a cab from Astoria to Washington Heights and disposed of the cooler in the wooded area where it was later discovered. Eerily, Juarez's confession perfectly aligned with the tip where a woman saw a Hispanic man and a Hispanic woman carrying a cooler a few days before the discovery, suggesting it was legit all along. Hoping that the remains would never be discovered, the pair parted their separate ways, never to talk about this again. In 1995, Belvina died, taking the disturbing secret to her grave, while Juarez went on with his life as if nothing happened. In this interview with police, Juarez also revealed that Angelica was mistreated and tortured at the hands of Belvina and her family on a regular basis for the last 2 years of her life. From starving to being harshly punished, the little girl went through an unspeakable amount of suffering in her already short life. It was finally time for her to get justice, as investigators took Juarez into their custody and charged him with first-degree murder. Police would later learn that at one time when Margarita demanded that Juarez let her see her girls, Juarez responded by saying that when he returned from Mexico, there was only one girl and that the other girl was dead. Detectives who had held Baby Hope close to their hearts all those years were disgusted by the fact that even after that, Margarita never went to the police or looked for her daughter. When the mother was asked in an interview what she would say to her dead daughter, she replied, "I would ask her to forgive me, that I wish I could have stopped him before he could hurt her." Unfortunately, after initially confessing to Angelica's murder, Conrado Juarez Ramirez recanted his words. This time, he claimed that his sister Belvina called him on his cell phone one night in July 1991, describing that Angelica had fallen down the stairs and she needed his help to dispose of her body. He then admitted that he helped her bind the child's body. Then he and Belvina drove to the Henry Hudson Parkway, where they dumped her body. After the recantation, prosecutors were having a hard time building a case against him. They were worried due to no forensic evidence linking Juarez to the murder. After Belvina's death, there was no potential witness either. While the investigators persisted that he described many things that only a killer would know, the defense focused more on the forensic evidence. Eventually, the case would come to conclusion after 22 years of a long battle, but not in a way anybody would have wanted. While in jail in 2018, 52-year-old Conrado Juarez Ramirez passed away after falling ill, pending his trial in Manhattan Supreme Court the following year. The case was officially closed after the only suspect was killed. As for Angelica's father, Gennaro Ramirez, investigators concluded that although he might have other potential victims of his own, he was most likely unaware of his daughter's fate once he left home and never came back. There is no doubt that this poor 4-year-old girl had been through a lot before tragically being murdered and left to rot. Yet it's amazing to see strangers pouring out their love for her while her own family failed and betrayed her. We can only hope that the little one could rest in peace with her name on her gravestone after 2 decades.
On January 3, 2023, 43-year-old Jennifer Brown disappeared in Limerick Township, Pennsylvania, leaving her 8-year-old son Noah alone at home. The next day, on January 4th, her close friend and business partner, 33-year-old Blair Watts, reported her missing when he could not get in touch with her. A large-scale search began as authorities, as well as her family and friends, scoured the town for any traces she could have left behind. What could have happened to Jennifer? Why would she abandon her son without any explanation? Limerick Township is a township in Montgomery County in the state of Pennsylvania in the United States. The township was named after the hometown of early settler William Evans, whose family arrived in the area from Limerick, Ireland in 1698. It can be found about 34 miles northwest of the city of Philadelphia, and today it has a population of just over 20,000 people. The town is drained by the Schuylkill River, which separates it from Chester County. One of its major industries is the Limerick Nuclear Power Plant, which provides employment to a number of people within the town. And it is here in Limerick Township that our story begins today. Jennifer Brown was born in 1979 in the United States of America. Growing up in the 80s, she had a happy and carefree childhood. Not much else is known about the early life of Jennifer Brown or where she came from. In 2014, she had her first and only child, a beautiful boy named Noah, who was the apple of her eye. His father was not in the picture, and she raised him on her own. She was a devoted mother who doted on her son, especially since he was diagnosed with autism at an early age and needed extra care and attention. In 2023, Jennifer was 43 years old and her son Noah was 8. They were living a happy life at 1408 Stratford Court in Limerick Township in Pennsylvania and needed nothing except each other. Their loved ones and neighbors saw the bond the two had and loved them for the kind and caring people they were. But tragedy was waiting just around the corner, and it arrived when they were least expecting it. On January 3, 2023, Jennifer Brown disappeared without any explanation to where she could have been. The last person to see her was her friend Blair Watts, who had been at her place from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. that day and had agreed to pick up her son Noah from his bus stop after school to take him for a sleepover to his house with his own 3 children, something that they did quite often. The next day, on January 4th, Noah was dropped off at his bus stop by Blair and attended school like he always did. However, that day at school, Noah seemed distraught and was acting out in class in a manner that was quite unusual for him. Concerned about his behavior, his teachers tried to find out why he was acting like this, and they learned that he had missed the last 2 doses of his autism medication, something that never happened. Noah also told them that his mother had gone to the grocery store and never come back. This further worried his teachers, as they knew Jennifer was a very hands-on mom who loved her son and would never forget to give him his medication and would never leave him alone. They tried to get in touch with her throughout the day but could not do so, which made them sure that something had gone wrong, as Jennifer always responded when it came to any problems her son might be having in school. At the same time that day, Jennifer's friend Blair Watts had also been trying to get in touch with her, but had had no success. He went over to Noah's bus stop at 4 p.m. that day to see if Jennifer would be there to pick him up, but she did not show. He picked up Noah himself and had no option left but to report her missing to the police. At 4:20 p.m. that day, Officer Stephen Crawford of the Limerick Township Police Department went over to 1408 Stratford Court to conduct a welfare check on Jennifer's home after she was reported missing. He found that her car was parked outside her home, and after entering the residence, he found her keys, purse, tablet, and work cell phone were all still inside the house. However, her personal cell phone was nowhere to be found, and when the police tried to track it down, they found that it had been switched off at 7 a.m. on January 4th and hadn't been traceable since. Its last known location was within 400 meters of Lewis Road and Ridge Pike in Limerick Township. Now sure that something bad had happened to Jennifer, she was confirmed as missing and a thorough investigation was launched into her disappearance. Police began by interviewing her family and friends as well as her neighbors to find out if anyone had seen or heard anything around the time she disappeared, or if they knew of any personal reasons that may have caused Jennifer to leave. But no one had seen or heard anything at the time, and everyone they spoke to, including her aunt Diane Bream, her friend Tiffany Barron, and her friend and business partner Blair Watts, said that there was no way Jennifer would leave on her own, as she would never abandon her son Noah, who she loved with all her heart. With no real leads to follow, they launched a search for her in the town and the surrounding areas, which was conducted by authorities as well as her family and friends and other volunteers who joined in. Despite a large number of people working together and thoroughly searching the area for the next 2 weeks, they could not find any traces of her or clues as to where she might have been. Her loved ones put out statements to the public pleading for anyone with any information to come forward, but nothing was reported. It seemed like Jennifer had vanished without a trace and may never be found. But on January 18th, 2 weeks after she had been reported missing, 2 employees who worked at a warehouse near the city of Royersford, a neighboring municipality to Limerick Town, went out for a smoke break in a field behind the warehouse. While they were smoking, they noticed something strange. It was a hole that they had not seen before that appeared to have been freshly dug. When they went closer to examine it, they were horrified to find the body of a woman buried there in a shallow grave. They immediately notified the police, who arrived soon after, and on examining the body, police identified the woman as the person they had been searching for the past 2 weeks. None other than Jennifer Brown. When the body was taken for an autopsy, the examiners determined the cause of death to be homicide by unspecified means. They were able to determine Jennifer had died from asphyxiation, which means that she had been strangled or suffocated to death in some way. They also found that she had 3 broken ribs, indicating that she had likely struggled against her killer, who had beaten her to subdue her. Now, the nature of the investigation changed from a missing persons case to a homicide, and police once again began to interview and interrogate everyone close to her, including her family and friends. However, the interviews they conducted did not turn up any new information or leads for them to follow. Due to this, they could not even identify any possible suspects in the case. It seemed like the investigation was going to fizzle out with nothing for the police to follow. But then, when they were least expecting it, they got a lead from an unexpected source. When the news regarding Jennifer's murder was released to the public, the police asked that anyone having any information that might be useful to the investigation should come forward and disclose it. In response to this, one of Noah's teachers came forward and revealed to the police that on January 4th, the day that Jennifer had gone missing, Noah had told her some information that she thought was unimportant at the time, but she realized was suspicious after learning of Jennifer's death. She told them that Noah had told her that when Blair Watts had picked him up from his bus stop on January 3rd, he had stopped at Noah's home under the pretext of getting Noah's iPad from the house. But when he returned, Noah saw that along with his iPad, Blair also had Jennifer's personal phone with him. Noah was sure that this was his mother's phone, as the image on the lock screen was a picture of him in the 2nd grade, something he recognized immediately. This was a major breakthrough for the police, as they had previously believed that whoever had killed Jennifer had taken her cell phone and knew that if they could find the person with the phone, they would have a suspect. Blair Watts now became the prime suspect in their eyes, and they decided to take a thorough look into his relationship with Jennifer to see if there was anything they had missed. When they did this, a number of details emerged that shocked the investigators looking into the matter. When the detectives began to look into the relationship between Jennifer and Blair, they discovered a number of suspicious details. On the personal side of their relationship, everything seemed to check out. The two did appear to be close friends who spent a lot of time together and knew each other's family and friends. But when they looked into their professional relationship as business partners, things were not as rosy as they seemed on the surface. Blair had owned a restaurant by the name of Birdie's Kitchen that ultimately went out of business and shut down in the early months of 2022. After this, he turned to Jennifer for help, and in August 2022, she agreed to help him by investing in his business so he could reopen Birdie's Kitchen at a new location. They signed a contract that said Jennifer would provide Blair with money every 6 weeks or so, which she would use to eventually get Birdie's Kitchen back in business. According to Blair, between August and January, Jennifer sent him around $36,000 to help him set up his business again. He also stated that according to their contract, she still owed him another $9,000 to fulfill her side of the deal. Blair had found a new location for the restaurant and was supposed to pay the property owners a sum of money and sign a lease so that he could open Birdie's Kitchen there in January of 2023. This money was given to him by Jennifer as an investment, but Blair never actually paid the property owners. He instead secretly blew the money on himself and his personal activities. On December 26, 2022, the property owners revoked the agreement they had with him as he failed to pay them the sum he owed them for the lease. This put Blair in a desperate situation. He now had no money and no location to open his restaurant. Police were sure in his desperation he had done something atrocious to try and save himself. They looked into the transaction history on Jennifer's iPad, which had been present in her home, and they found that on January 3rd there were 2 cash transfers from her account to Birdie's Kitchen, which totaled an amount of $17,000, which was never a part of the written agreement between Jennifer and Blair. They also saw that the transfers had failed multiple times and were only successful when the 2-factor authentication system on the iPad was disabled. Police then interviewed the property owners who had revoked the agreement with Blair, and they learned that on January 4th, the very same day that Blair had reported Jennifer as missing, he had shown up at the property and told the owners he now had the money that he needed to put down a lease. Police were now sure that Blair had murdered his friend and business partner, but since they knew he would likely not confess to the crime, seeing the lengths he had gone to cover it up, they decided they needed more evidence against him. Next, they interviewed his wife Tiara Taylor and asked her about Blair's whereabouts on January 3rd, the day that they believed he murdered Jennifer. His wife told them that Blair had gone over to Jennifer's around 1 p.m. on that day and had then returned home at around 4:30 p.m. with Noah after picking him up at his stop. She then told them that he had only been at home for a short time before leaving again at around 5 p.m. and not returning home that night. When police looked into where Blair had gone after leaving home, they found out that he had spent the night with his mistress, a woman named Tatiana Garrett. But when they interviewed Tatiana, she told them that Blair only met her around 8 p.m., which meant that between 5 and 8 p.m. there was a window of time where his location was unaccounted for. The detectives now had enough information to construct a timeline of how they believed the murder had taken place. They believed that on January 3rd, Blair had gone over to Jennifer's while Noah was at school at around 1 p.m. and murdered her. He then made the cash transfer to his account from her iPad and left to pick up Noah from his bus stop around 4 p.m. He then returned to Jennifer's home, saying he wanted to get Noah's iPad, but also stole Jennifer's mobile phone as well, the crucial piece of evidence that had led them to suspecting him. After this, he had returned home, dropped Noah off, and then left again at 5 p.m. to Jennifer's, where he collected her body and then drove it to the field near Royersford, where he buried her in a shallow grave. He had then gone to meet his mistress and spent the rest of the night with her before returning home in the morning so he could drop off Noah at the bus stop. He had then gone to the property owners to tell them he now had the money for the lease and then returned around 4 p.m. to pretend to see if Jennifer would pick up Noah from the bus stop so he could then report her missing to the police and make sure that they did not suspect him. He had meticulously planned everything out and may have gotten away with it if it wasn't for the mistake he made letting Noah see his mother's phone. It was Noah seeing the phone and telling his teacher about it that led the police right to Blair. The police now had enough evidence to charge him, but they did one final thing to be sure. They used a cadaver dog that was trained to smell out biological remains and identify them, to first sniff out Jennifer's home, where it identified that she had been killed in her kitchen from the smell that lingered there. They then took this dog to Blair's car, and it identified the same smell as being present there as well. This was the final nail in the coffin for Blair, and it was the last piece of evidence the detectives needed. On February 8th, Blair was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, third-degree murder, and theft. He is currently being held at the Montgomery County Correctional Facility without the possibility of bail and is awaiting a preliminary hearing. Jennifer's friends and family, who were devastated when she was found dead, are happy that her killer has been identified and that they have some form of closure. However, they are still reeling in shock that it was someone they all knew and trusted and who was supposed to be a close friend to Jennifer. It's literally like we're living in a movie that we watch on TV. It's so surreal and unbelievable. Tiffany Barron, Jennifer's friend who is acting as a spokesperson for the family, said in a statement to the press, "Once the case goes to trial, if Blair is found guilty, he will likely spend the rest of his life in jail." And there we have it, folks, the tale of how a case was only solved because the 8-year-old son of the victim noticed a mistake the killer made and didn't forget about it. This case serves as an example that when you commit a horrible act like Blair did, you will always get found out in the end. But what did you think of the case? Do you think Blair would have gotten away with it if Noah hadn't noticed his mother's phone? Or do you think it was only a matter of time till the police found out about the transactions he made and began to suspect him?
On May 1, 2023, 34-year-old Manijay Starn, a mother of 3, was reported missing by her father. She vanished without a trace from her apartment in St. Paul, Ramsey County, Minnesota, sometime in April 2023. As officers from the St. Paul Police Department launched an immediate investigation to locate her, they uncovered unsettling details that pointed to one person, 40-year-old Joseph Stephen Jorgensen, her boyfriend. What dark and horrifying secrets would be unraveled as they dug deeper into Jorgensen's involvement? Would the truth behind Manijay's disappearance finally come to light? St. Paul, located in Ramsey County, Minnesota, is a vibrant city pulsating with history and modern allure. Home to more than 300,000 residents, it embraces diversity and fosters a sense of community. One of the oldest cities in Minnesota, St. Paul has several historic neighborhoods and landmarks, such as the Summit Avenue neighborhood, the James J. Hill House, and the Cathedral of St. Paul. According to statistics, your chance of being a victim of violent crime in St. Paul is 1 in 124, and property crime is 1 in 24. However, even in the face of progress, the city was shaken to its core when a heinous and unthinkable crime occurred in 2023. Manijay Starn was born on May 23, 1989. There is little information about her early life. Records indicate she had a brother named Noah Starn, but whether she had other siblings remains unknown. By the year 2023, at the age of 34, Manijay was a single mother of 3 children. Her residence was a modest apartment located at 1428 7th Street in St. Paul, Ramsey County, Minnesota. It remains uncertain whether she had ever been married. Accounts from those acquainted with Manijay during this time painted a picture of a likable individual. Those who encountered her spoke of her positivity, patience, and kindness that extended to everyone she encountered, regardless of their background. However, amid these commendable qualities, Manijay grappled with personal demons. She faced the challenges of drug addiction and mental health issues. These struggles were known to her family and played a role in her children not living with her, as she was struggling to overcome her own battles. The circumstances surrounding Manijay's addiction and mental health concerns certainly prevented her from providing a stable environment for her children. Despite the challenges, life continued to unfold for Manijay. Then something unexpected happened. On May 1, 2023, the St. Paul police received a distress call from Manijay's father.
This investigation began on May 1st when the family of Manijay Staran reported her missing. Manijay also is referred to as Manny by her friends and family.
During the call, he revealed troubling details about Manijay's struggles with drug addiction and mental health issues. He disclosed that she had plans to enter a drug treatment center, but failed to show up. The last contact he had with Manijay was on April 18, 2023. She had appeared paranoid and afraid. Her father expressed concerns that she was frightened of a boyfriend. With the call concluded, the officers sprang into action. They looked for Manijay at her apartment. Unfortunately, she was nowhere to be found. In their pursuit of answers, the investigators located and engaged in conversation with an individual simply identified as the father of one of Manijay's children. The man revealed that he too had not heard from Manijay, and this deviated from her usual routine. Normally, she would regularly check in on him due to their shared responsibility for their son. He shared his concern, emphasizing that it was highly unusual for Manijay to go more than 8 hours without reaching out to ensure their child's well-being. Additionally, the man disclosed that Manijay had reached out to him from various phone numbers in the past. However, their last conversation was on April 21, 2023. The investigators also tracked down a neighbor of Manijay. During their conversations, the neighbor shared a disturbing observation. According to the neighbor, she had witnessed Manijay at one time bearing a black eye and red marks on her neck. It's not clear when this happened exactly, but the neighbor had been alarmed by the distressing sight and confronted Manijay. She asked Manijay if she had been assaulted. To her dismay, Manijay had confirmed the neighbor's suspicions. Despite the neighbor's immediate instinct to call the police, Manijay pleaded against involving law enforcement, convinced it would only worsen the situation. This revelation added a layer of complexity to the investigation, leaving the officers grappling with the haunting reality that had enveloped Manijay's life. Continuing their investigation, the detectives proceeded to speak with the manager of Manijay's apartment complex. He provided them with some valuable insights. They learned that Manijay had a boyfriend named Joe, who frequented her apartment despite not being listed on the lease. The manager then provided the investigators with a phone number associated with Joe. With the obtained phone number in hand, the investigators conducted their inquiries and confirmed that it belonged to a 40-year-old man named Joseph Steve Jorgensen. Presenting Jorgensen's photograph to the manager, they sought confirmation, and the manager identified him as the individual known to him as Manijay's boyfriend. This revelation marked a turning point in the investigation, setting the stage for an unsettling and bizarre series of events to follow. Now, an apartment surveillance camera situated near Manijay's residence proved to be a crucial piece of evidence. On May 24, 2023, investigators were informed by the apartment manager that the surveillance video had been found, capturing an alarming incident from April 21, 2023. In the footage, Manijay was seen fleeing from her apartment in evident distress, with Jorgensen, her boyfriend, in swift pursuit. He forcefully turned her around and directed her back into the apartment. The video indicated that this was the last known sighting of Manijay entering her apartment on that fateful day between 5:55 and 6 p.m. But there was no corresponding footage showing her exiting the premises.
But it does reveal evidence of Manny coming and going from her apartment, and then at a certain point, we do not see Manny again. So we see her go into her apartment, she does not come out. Jorgensen is the only one that comes out of the unit, and Manny is never seen again until we find her in Woodbury.
Further examination of the surveillance recordings revealed multiple instances of Jorgensen entering and leaving the apartment between April 21st, 2023 and April 28th, 2023. Astonishingly, it was determined that Jorgensen accessed the apartment a total of 28 times during this period. Adding to the intrigue, the apartment management confirmed that Manegé possessed only one set of keys for the residence. The surveillance footage captured Jorgensen utilizing a key for every visit he made to the apartment. As all these discoveries came to light, the investigators were left with a multitude of unsettling questions. What happened during Jorgensen's repeated visits to Manegé's apartment? And most importantly, where was Manegé now? Further analysis of the surveillance footage also revealed that at 4:55 p.m. on May 28, 2023, Jorgensen was captured on camera carrying 2 duffel bags and a suitcase as he exited the apartment. He loaded the bags into a pickup truck bearing the Minnesota license plate NLV 677. Taking a seat on the driver's side, Jorgensen swiftly drove away. The investigators soon discovered that the pickup truck belonged to a man residing in the apartment building at 89 Century Avenue in Maplewood. In the wake of these developments, investigators sought out a family friend who possessed crucial insights into Manegé's behavior and relationships. The family friend revealed that despite Manegé's struggles with drugs and crises, she had never gone more than 24 hours without contacting her loved ones. This consistent pattern had made her sudden absence all the more concerning. Additionally, the family friend disclosed a conversation with Jorgensen, whom he had spoken to over the phone following Manegé's disappearance. Jorgensen had told him at the time that Manegé had left for the store but never returned. According to the family friend, Jorgensen also expressed concerns that a man named Cassell may have caused harm to Manegé. Jorgensen had described this Cassell as a suspicious individual. The family friend revealed that he had not been in contact with Jorgensen since that conversation. Armed with this newfound information, the investigators recognized the gravity of the situation at hand. They couldn't ignore the fact that Jorgensen had made no effort to report Manegé as missing to the police. Furthermore, the evidence indicated that no one apart from Jorgensen had entered Manegé's apartment after her disappearance. This revelation heightened their suspicions, and they directed their focus squarely onto Jorgensen as a person of interest.
He was the last known person to be in her apartment on 7th Street after her disappearance. The one piece about Jorgensen is that he did not report her missing to police. Instead, he just went on with his life without saying anything to anyone.
With growing concerns and mounting evidence, the police decided to conduct a thorough search of Manegé's apartment. Accompanied by a property manager, an officer entered the premises. As they stepped inside, their attention was immediately drawn to the unsettling discoveries within. The officer and property manager noticed that the window screen to one of the bedroom windows lay discarded on the floor. Furthermore, a closer examination of the living room revealed a television with a cracked screen in multiple places. The property manager confirmed that the screen had not been damaged before this discovery. As they continued their search, the officers noticed a broken glass panel on the microwave. It showed signs of having been cleaned up. In Manegé's bedroom, they observed that the bedsheet had been partially removed, revealing a foam pad atop the mattress. To their surprise, the foam pad bore a large hole that had been deliberately cut and removed. Adding to the disconcerting scene, red stains were visible at the foot of the bed. These findings intensified the growing unease surrounding Manegé's disappearance, propelling the investigators further into a labyrinth of unsettling clues and harrowing possibilities. Following the necessary legal procedures, the officers obtained a warrant to thoroughly search and process Manegé's apartment for vital forensic evidence. The warrant was executed on May 25, 2023. Careful examination of the apartment by crime scene technicians unveiled a disconcerting truth. Substantial amounts of blood were discovered in the living room, notably on the couch, the floor, and the kitchen area. The telltale signs of an attempted cleanup indicated that someone had made desperate efforts to remove the traces of the blood. It became increasingly evident that someone had been seriously injured or even died within the apartment walls. In subsequent analysis, the preliminary findings confirmed the grim reality. The blood samples collected from the scene belonged to none other than Manegé herself. Continuing their investigation, the authorities uncovered vital information regarding Manegé's finances. It was revealed that she received assistance through the state of Minnesota in the form of Electronic Benefits Transfer (EBT) card. This card enables recipients of government aid, such as food stamps, to make direct purchases from retailers. Recognizing the significance of this revelation, a warrant was swiftly obtained to access Manegé's EBT account records. The investigation unveiled a series of transactions that occurred after her last known sighting on April 21, 2023. One such transaction took place on May 9, 2023, where Jorgensen used Manegé's EBT card to conduct an ATM withdrawal at the Speedway located at 11 Century Avenue North in Maplewood. That same day, he used Manegé's EBT card at the Dollar Tree store located at 7150 Valley Creek Plaza in Woodbury. There he made a rather peculiar purchase. His shopping list included a cleaning bucket, 2 boxes of saran wrap, paper towels, garbage bags, liquid cleaner, latex gloves, and disinfectant wipes. This was a suspicious assortment of supplies that piqued the interest of the investigators. On May 11, 2023, Jorgensen made another transaction using Manegé's EBT card, this time at the Cub Food Store, situated at 1177 Clarence Street in St. Paul, Ramsey County. He also used the card at a different Dollar Tree store, situated at 7085 10th Street, North in Oakdale. This time around, he procured more paper towels, 4 additional boxes of saran wrap, cleaning products, and disinfectant wipes. The recurrent purchase of such items only served to deepen the mystery surrounding Jorgensen's activities and intentions. Adding another layer of intrigue, authorities uncovered evidence implicating another individual, simply identified as ZD. This ZD also utilized Manegé's EBT card. Following this, investigators proceeded to obtain a search warrant to access information related to Jorgensen's Gmail and Google accounts. Analyzing the obtained data, a series of noteworthy Google searches made by Jorgensen came to light, further deepening the investigators' concerns. On April 21, 2023, Jorgensen had searched for the word jugular. On May 1, 2023, he searched for "What do police do with a missing persons report?" On May 3, 2023, Jorgensen saw information on how to clear cookies from an Android phone. On May 27, 2023, his search query was how to remove GPS from a Lime scooter. On June 4, 2023, Jorgensen looked up lime for soil. Now at this point, one thing you should know is that lime, the substance Jorgensen had inquired about, can be utilized to speed up the decomposition process of a body and also the associated odors. The police were well aware of this fact, and this further heightened their concerns regarding Jorgensen's potential involvement in the disappearance of Manegé. Based on the compelling evidence against Jorgensen, the police made a decisive move.
Our investigators focused on an apartment earlier this week on Monday in relation to a search warrant in Maplewood at an address on Century Avenue.
The apartment investigators focused on and obtained a warrant to search was Jorgensen's. On June 26, 2023, a SWAT team moved in to execute the warrants, prepared for a potentially volatile encounter. As the officers confronted Jorgensen in his apartment, he responded with resistance, barricading himself within his bedroom. In a shocking turn of events, to the dismay of all present, Jorgensen started a fire, further escalating the danger and urgency of the situation. With utmost caution, the SWAT team made their move. A struggle ensued, and Jorgensen fiercely fought against the officers, even making an attempt to seize the firearm of a SWAT officer. Eventually, the officers successfully apprehended Jorgensen. As a precautionary measure, he was promptly transported to the Regions Hospital for evaluation. This was to ensure his well-being and address any potential mental health concerns that may have contributed to his actions. In addition to Jorgensen, 2 other individuals were present in the apartment when he was apprehended. One of them, an unidentified female, bore marks of physical harm. She had multiple bruises, scratches, and a red neck. The woman would later tell the police that Jorgensen had strangled her and issued threats of violence, including chilling words like, "The neighbors won't hear you scream." The second person in the apartment was Jorgensen's roommate. During the standoff between Jorgensen and the police, the roommate had taken refuge in his own bedroom. The roommate was also taken into custody without resistance. Later at the St. Paul Police Department, the roommate provided a statement during an interview. He disclosed that he suffered from a traumatic brain injury that had resulted in a loss of his sense of smell. Additionally, he revealed a long-standing acquaintance with Jorgensen. Notably, the roommate clarified, due to his Monday through Friday work schedule, he had minimal interaction with Jorgensen or the women Jorgensen brought to the apartment. Following these events, officers interviewed ZD, a friend of Jorgensen. He was the other man who had also been observed using Manegé's EBT card. The exact timing of the interview with ZD remains unclear. During the discussion, ZD revealed that he had only met Manegé once or twice, emphasizing that he did not have a close relationship with her. According to ZD, when he inquired about Manegé, Jorgensen informed him that she had been admitted to a mental health facility. ZD further disclosed that it was Jorgensen who provided him with both Manegé's EBT card and its corresponding PIN, leading him to assume that Jorgensen had permission to use the card. In addition, officers interviewed the apartment manager responsible for Jorgensen's residence. The manager disclosed that multiple complaints had been lodged around May 15th or 16th, 2023, regarding a putrid odor coming from Jorgensen's apartment.
It was kind of like, like spoiled milk and a baby diaper kind of mix. It was just really a strong odor.
The foul smell permeated the entire building. It was described by the manager as resembling that of a dead animal. Shedding further light on the situation, the manager revealed that on May 18th, 2023, both he and a maintenance employee attempted to gain access to the apartment for inspection. However, Jorgensen responded with verbal hostility and physically prevented them from entering a particular bedroom, which appeared to be the source of the odor. Undeterred, the manager informed Jorgensen and his roommate that the apartment needed to be cleaned within a week, to which they complied. The manager then disclosed that shortly after, he and the maintenance employee witnessed Jorgensen carrying and dragging large black duffel bags out of the apartment. Struck by the sight, they had exchanged remarks suggesting the possibility of Jorgensen transporting a dead body. In response to these findings, the Forensic Services Unit of the St. Paul Police Department carefully processed Jorgensen's apartment.
A search of the apartment did reveal additional blood evidence that we believe is related to this case.
Their report revealed the discovery of a large pool of blood in the front closet, which coincided with the location from where the foul odor had been reported. The blood had seeped through the carpet and carpet pad, and the presence of other biological material and recent maggot activity further compounded the disturbing nature of the scene. Additionally, blood was also found in the closet where Jorgensen had attempted to start the fire. Furthermore, as part of the investigation, officers recovered 2 padlock keys within Jorgensen's apartment following his arrest. Upon reviewing Jorgensen's phone records, it was discovered that his phone had registered a ping within the vicinity of an iStorage unit situated at 881 Weir Drive in Woodbury on May 18, 2023. Someone using Jorgensen's roommate's name began renting a storage unit at the facility on May 5, 2023. Notably, the access code assigned to the unit was used to enter the facility precisely at the time when Jorgensen's phone pinged in the same area. Recognizing the significance of this information, investigators swiftly obtained a warrant to search the storage unit. On June 28, 2023, 2 days after Jorgensen's arrest, investigators proceeded to the designated storage unit. As they approached the scene, they were greeted by a distinct and terrible odor, consistent with decomposing flesh. One of the keys obtained from Jorgensen's apartment appeared to fit one of the padlocks. However, the investigators eventually resorted to cutting the 2 padlocks to gain access. Upon entering, they discovered the presence of several items: a large cooler carefully wrapped in plastic, a blue duffel bag, and a compact carry-on suitcase. Notably, one of these bags matched the same bag Jorgensen was observed removing from Manegé's apartment in the video footage. Additionally, atop the cooler, a green tote was found, containing cleaning supplies consistent with those previously purchased by Jorgensen. Acting under the direction of the Forensic Services Unit, 2 coolers and a duffel bag were carefully removed from the unit. A distinct and overpowering stench of decomposing flesh emanated from these containers. Enclosed within multiple layers of plastic, the contents remained inaccessible until they were transported to the medical examiner's office for further examination. Upon examination using an X-ray machine, it was revealed that the coolers and bag contained a human body. The larger cooler yielded a torso, while the larger bag held the arms and legs. The smaller cooler, on the other hand, contained a head. Subsequently, the Ramsey County Medical Examiner's Office conducted an autopsy on the recovered remains. The first set of remains, the torso, was carefully removed from the large cooler, extensively enveloped in layers of saran wrap and multiple bags. Great care had been taken to preserve and conceal it. The next set of remains to be removed was the head, similarly encased in numerous layers of saran wrap and bags. Finally, the third set of remains, consisting of 2 arms, 2 thighs, and the remaining portions of the legs and feet, were removed from the duffel bag. These remains had also been carefully wrapped in a substantial amount of saran wrap. Unwrapping the remains proved to be a time-consuming task for the medical examiner. With the completion of thorough examinations and analysis, the medical examiner successfully confirmed the identity of the remains as belonging to none other than Mangea.
On Thursday, June 29th, yesterday, the Ramsey County Medical Examiner did identify those remains as Manny Starin of St. Paul.
Identification was established through recognized tattoos and dental records. Tragically, the determination of the manner of her death led to the conclusion that it was a homicide. Following this, investigators turned their attention back to the surveillance footage obtained from Mangea's apartment, placing a particular focus on the bags that Jorgensen had removed from the premises. Upon careful review, it became increasingly apparent that Jorgensen had dismembered Mangea within her own apartment, meticulously dividing her remains and placing them in various bags he carried out. Jorgensen faced a series of charges in connection to the death of Mangea. He was formally accused of 1 count of second-degree murder, reflecting the gravity of his alleged actions. Additionally, Jorgensen was charged with arson for deliberately setting a fire within his apartment during the confrontation with the SWAT team officers. The charges extended to include offenses such as threats of violence and disarming an officer. On the afternoon of June 30, 2023, Jorgensen appeared briefly in court to address the murder charge. Throughout the proceedings, he shook his head from side to side, reacting to Assistant Ramsey County Attorney Isabella Eastwood as she presented details from the complaint. Eastwood further requested that bail be set at $5 million, a proposal that received the approval of Judge Timothy Carey. Jorgensen remained mostly silent during the court appearance, offering only his name when prompted. The defense attorney opted to reserve any arguments regarding bail for a later date, suggesting that a comprehensive defense strategy was being prepared. During a press conference held on the same day Jorgensen made his court appearance, St. Paul Police Sergeant Mike Ernster unveiled a significant development that emerged during their ongoing investigation. It was revealed that another woman, Fanta Giavong, aged 33, another former girlfriend of Jorgensen, was also missing. Notably, the last known sighting of Giavong occurred in July 2021 in the company of none other than Jorgensen himself. Intriguingly, her absence had not been previously reported, prompting the police to initiate a recent missing person investigation. Tragically, on July 7th, police said in a news conference that they had found the remains of Fanta Giavong, 33, in a separate storage unit in Coon Rapids, north of Minneapolis, and 30 miles from the unit where Starn's body had been discovered. More details have not yet been released regarding this second victim, but it is widely believed that Jorgensen is responsible for her murder as well. Amid these ongoing developments, Manage's family expressed their gratitude to the police for pursuing every lead in their relentless search for the truth. As for Jorgensen, if found guilty, he could face a maximum sentence of up to 40 years in prison for the charge of second-degree murder. Jorgensen's next court appearance is scheduled for August 21, 2023. In the aftermath of this harrowing case, the truth surrounding Manage's untimely demise has been unraveled, and justice is now being pursued. The efforts of law enforcement have brought us closer to understanding the tragic events that unfolded. As we contemplate the chilling details surrounding Jorgensen's actions, a haunting question arises. Are we on the verge of uncovering a potential serial killer?
This is the most horrific crime that I had ever seen.
The case that cannot be forgotten.
Oh, God.
On August 28, 2014, 32-year-old Timothy Ray Jones Jr. committed an unthinkable act.
Now, this next case is very unique, both in terms of its details and the legal question on mental illness.
In their family mobile home on South Lake Drive in Red Bank, New Jersey, Timothy took the lives of his 5 children, aged 1 to 8. What could have caused this father to kill his own children? Red Bank is a neighborhood in Monmouth County in the U.S. state of New Jersey. The Navesink River, the region's traditional means of transit to the ocean and other ports, runs through the community, which was incorporated in 1908. Red Bank is a commuter town for New York City and is located in the metropolitan area of New York. The borough has a population of 12,936 as of the 2020 United States Census. It was in this neighborhood that 5 young children met their end in the most horrific manner in August 2014. Timothy Jones Jr. was born in 1981 to Timothy Jones Sr. and Cindy Jones, who was 16 at the time of her pregnancy. Sadly, Cindy left the house when Jones Jr. was only 18 months old. Following this, Timothy Jones Sr. remarried. Growing up, Jones Jr. faced legal trouble in 2001 when he was arrested in Illinois on charges of possessing cocaine, forging checks, and car theft. Despite being sentenced to 7 years in prison, he was released in 2003 after serving just 2 years. After this, his life seemed to take a turn for the better. He and Amber Kaiser had met as teenagers and they got married in 2004. They soon had 3 children. Jones continued his education, eventually getting an engineering degree and graduating from Mississippi State University. The young family later moved to Blythewood, seeking better opportunities of life. By 2014, they had 5 children who were 8-year-old Marag Gracie, 7-year-old Elias, 6-year-old Nathan, 2-year-old Gabrielle, and 1-year-old Abigail Elaine. As time went on, their marriage began to falter, and Jones' behavior changed drastically as he turned to drinking, smoking, and using synthetic marijuana. Amidst these challenges, Amber gave birth to their last child, Abigail Elaine. However, Jones had doubts about whether he was the father of the child, due to this and other problems in their marriage. Jones and Amber got divorced in 2013. After the divorce, Jones won custody of the children.
Tim and I had a lot of good times. It just becomes a point when things are volatile that you just make a choice. Where young children aren't seeing certain things, it's affecting them at a point. And you make a choice to separate yourself from that person. And it's hard to separate yourself from that person because that's all you've known. All I knew from 19 was Tim.
It was expected that Jones would be the model father and give his all to protect his children. But who could have predicted the horror that would come later? On Thursday, August 28, 2014, Jones picked up his 3 older children from school and the 2 youngest from their babysitter. He vanished the very next day. Jones and the children were gone for several days, prompting his family to reach out to the police, but only after they were unable to get in touch with him for several days. At 9:36 a.m. the next day, the babysitter Elk tried reaching him on the phone, but received no response. Unfazed, Elk decided to text Jones at 9:38, inquiring about dropping off the youngest children at daycare. Jones responded, "Don't worry about this morning. I'll see you next week." He assured her that the children would return on Tuesday, the day following Memorial Day. Meanwhile, Jones's grandmother, Roberta Thornsberry, desperately tried to reach him from Mississippi, but he declined her calls. On August 30th, Thornsberry grew increasingly concerned and sent a series of texts to Jones throughout the day, finally questioning him at 5:13 p.m. about his unresponsiveness. At 4:54 p.m., Elk gently reminded Jones to bring diapers when dropping off Gabrielle and Abigail Elaine on September 1st. Later at 6:15 p.m., he made a call to Elk revealing his intentions to leave South Carolina with the children and start afresh. He asked Elk to clean up his mobile home and offered her whatever she wanted from the things he left behind. At 7 p.m., a call from Amber came in, but Jones didn't answer.
Tim, I'm not calling to argue or anything. I just, like, the past 2 or 3 phone calls, you've been, like, really on the edge. You saying you're, like, coming off really frustrated or whatever. And I was just concerned about you, so please call. I'm not calling to argue or anything.
His family reached out to the police as they couldn't reach him. A nationwide alert was released looking for Jones and indicated that he was missing and traveling with his 5 children. But it wouldn't be until September 6 that they received news on his whereabouts. On September 6, 2014, a routine traffic safety stop in Smith County, Mississippi led to a shocking discovery. Tim Jones Jr. was detained at around 7 p.m. Under Sheriff Marty Patterson went to the scene around 8 p.m. He noticed that Jones showed signs of intoxication as he approached Jones's car. An Escalade emitted a foul stench. Bleach stains along the baseboard caught Patterson's attention. Running Jones' ID and license plate revealed an alarming hit from the FBI's National Crime Information Center, indicating that Jones was supposed to be traveling from Lexington with his 5 children. Patterson immediately contacted the Lexington County Sheriff's Department.
We did advise you of your rights, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, can you just state your name?
Tim Jones.
When questioned about his children, Jones initially denied having any, but when pressed further, he claimed to have only 3 children in South Carolina. Smith County investigators promptly reached out to Jones's father, Tim Jones Sr., who then informed Jones's grandmother, Roberta Thornsberry, and Amber, Jones's ex-wife. On September 8, 2014, investigative officers from the Lexington County Sheriff's Department and SLED arrived in Mississippi to delve into the case. 2 days later, on September 9th, Jones agreed to lead investigators to the bodies of his children. The discovery unfolded on September 10th, when the bodies of Marag Gracie, Elias, Nathan, Gabriel, and Abigail Elaine were recovered. The evidence collected from Jones's Escalade on September 11th was disturbing and haunting. Among the items logged were family photos, clothing, drawings made by the children, letters to the children penned by their mother, Amber, Bibles, Tim Jones's diploma from Mississippi State University, and his passport. Equally chilling were handwritten notes by Timothy Jones, containing lists of disturbing tasks such as melt bodies, sand bones to dust or small pieces, and burn up bodies. The list also included items needed for these horrifying acts, such as camping supplies, gas, and acid. It seemed unbelievable that this father had meticulously planned to kill and dispose of the bodies of all 5 of his children. On September 13, 2014, Jones was booked into Kirkland Correctional Facility, where he was placed in solitary confinement, away from the general population. But what had transpired on that fateful day? Why did Jones kill the children, and what prompted him to hide their bodies? Jones's confession and the police's investigation led them to the dark truth of what Jones did in the week when he disappeared with his children. The afternoon of Thursday, August 28, 2014, set the stage for the chilling chain of events. Tim Jones picked up his 3 older children from school and retrieved his 2 youngest from the babysitter. Little did anyone know that this seemingly ordinary day would take a nightmarish turn. Before 7 p.m., a storm of anger engulfed the family's mobile home. Jones confronted his 6-year-old son, Nathan, about damaged power outlets. He beat Nathan and subjected the child to a punishing physical ordeal. Jones went further to rain down a barrage of questions on the young child. At 7:10 p.m., there was a phone call from his estranged wife, Amber. Nathan, in fear and distress, revealed that the incident had been an accident. But Jones intervened, accusing Amber of protecting their son before abruptly ending the conversation. As the evening wore on, the darkness deepened. Nathan was sent to bed, and Amber's desperate attempts to reach out went unanswered. The details here were unclear, but around 8:30 p.m., Jones either discovered Nathan's lifeless body or attempted to ruse the boy to no avail. Jones faced the grim reality that his child was gone forever. Jones, seemingly triggered by his own imagination, would later claim to the authorities that Nathan was trying to harm him through the mobile home's electricity. This paranoia pushed him to kill his children. In the early hours of the following day, Jones took his 8-year-old daughter Marag to a convenience store to buy cigarettes. Upon returning home, a wave of violence consumed him. In his confession to the authorities, Jones admitted to choking Marah and Elias, aged 8 and 7, with his bare hands. While using a belt to end the lives of Gabriel and Abigail Elaine, he then wrapped the bodies of his children in sheets and blankets from their beds, before placing them in the back seat of his vehicle. The authorities also went through Jones's search history and revealed an unusual interest in herbal incense and Atlanta. It became apparent that Jones was on the hunt for spice, a synthetic marijuana that happened to be legal in South Carolina but banned in Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. Determined to get his hands on the substance, he scoured the internet for smoke shops or head shops across state borders. Around this time, he also declined calls from his grandmother, who he had made prior plans with. She had left up to 23 calls and texts. Tracking data suggested Jones's presence near Moody, Alabama at 2:20 p.m. In the late afternoon, between 3 and 5 p.m., Jones continued his search for smoke shops, this time focusing on Alabama and Mississippi. As the day progressed, Jones's location hopped from Lithium Springs, Georgia at 8:04 p.m. to Washington, Georgia at 10:29 p.m. It was clear that he was covering considerable ground. By August 30th, the location of Jones's phone indicated that he was in Red Bank. By August 31st, the search queries on Jones's phone revealed his plans to start anew. He looked up camping options in South Carolina, dumps in Lexington County, and animal services. On September 1st, a store receipt found in Jones's vehicle put him in Athens, Georgia. Surprisingly, data from his phone also indicated his presence in Spartansburg and Winsboro. At 1:20 a.m. that same day, the phone's location switched to Folly Beach. The situation took a darker turn on September 2nd at 10:35 a.m. when Jones conducted a series of concerning Google searches. He looked up body in landfill, muriatic acid burn, camping near Columbia, South Carolina. What does no extradition laws mean? And facing legal problems, where should you run? The phone was traced to West Columbia between 11 a.m. and noon. Jones and Elk exchanged texts about arrangements to clean his Red Bank mobile home. At 11:54 a.m., Jones's boss, Intel, Jim McConnell, reached out to inquire about his absence from work. Additionally, there were unanswered calls from Sachs Gotha School regarding Marah, Elias, and Nathan around 1:30 p.m. The situation escalated as an unanswered call from McConnell followed at 1:53 p.m. The phone's location was further traced to Clinton, South Carolina at 3:22 p.m., Athens, Georgia at 4:19 p.m., and Lawrenceville, Georgia at 6:04 p.m. Throughout this tumultuous day, Jones ignored 2 calls from Amber at 6 p.m. and received an update call from Elk at 10:08 p.m. By September 3rd, the situation had grown concerning. Jones missed 2 calls and an unanswered text from Kevin McKinney, a co-worker at Intel, at 10:07 a.m. Additionally, his boss' call at 12:11 p.m. went unanswered too. Surveillance footage from various locations on September 3rd spotted Jones at the Augusta Road Walmart in Lexington, an Advanced Auto Store in Lake City, and a Dollar General in Orangeburg. Disturbingly, the Walmart footage showed him purchasing items like a saw blades, muriatic acid, garbage bags, a 5-gallon bucket, and goggles. On September 4th at 3:37 a.m., when the phone powered on again, Jones Googled missing children Tim Jones, and the phone was traced to James Island, near Charleston. Later that day, Thornsberry and Sachs Gotha's texts went unanswered, and Jones's phone was traced to Camden and then Orangeburg at 5:17 p.m. At 6:33 p.m., Jones was spotted using the Augusta Road ATM in Lexington, depositing a check for $3,518.49. This money revealed to be proceeds from Intel stock he sold weeks prior. The climax occurred on September 6th. Jones would reveal to the authorities that he placed the decomposing bodies of his children in black plastic garbage bags along a logging road between Greenville and Camden, Alabama. The bodies had been in the back seat of his vehicle since August 29, 2014. At 9:14 a.m., the phone was located in Greenville, Alabama. Receipts and surveillance video from the same day showed Jones at the Bypass Food Mart in Camden, Alabama at 1:06 p.m. It is unusual for a father to commit such an act. This made the authorities seek to understand what pushed Tim to kill the children. Hence, an investigation was launched to verify his mental state. In the wake of his incarceration, mental health professionals closely examined Tim Jones Jr.'s psychological state. Clinical and forensic psychiatrists and psychologists were involved in the evaluation, but there were disagreement among them regarding his diagnosis. While others suggested he may have a schizoaffective disorder or a personality disorder. Additionally, they debated whether his mental state during the crime could have been influenced by the use of synthetic marijuana, or if a traumatic brain injury he suffered at age 15 played a role in underlying psychosis. These varying theories were presented to the jury during the trial. To shed light on the roots of Tim Jones Jr.'s mental state, the history of the Jones family spanning 3 generations was diagrammed and explored. The aim was to understand how a turbulent environment and a familial background mental illness could have impacted Tim Jr.'s mental health. During the trial, the jury learned about the circumstances surrounding the conception and birth of Tim Jones Sr. Roberta Thornsberry, Tim Sr.'s mother, had been assaulted by her stepfather, leading to her pregnancy at just 12 years old. Surprisingly, Tim Jr.'s mother, Cynthia, also had a family history of mental illness. Tim Jr. was born when the young couple were barely out of their teens. However, their relationship turned volatile, leading to Cynthia's attempt to take Tim Jr. away from his father. Ultimately, Tim Sr. gained custody, and as a result, Tim Jr. was raised by his grandmother, Roberta Thornsberry. Meanwhile, Tim Sr. had Cynthia confined to a mental hospital in New York after she was diagnosed with schizophrenia. These intricate family dynamics were presented as evidence to help the jury comprehend the complex web of factors that may have contributed to Tim Jones Jr.'s mental state. Thornberry's marriage had its fair share of woes. Numerous incidences of the marriage involved calls to the police for shootings, stabbings, drug possession, and physical and alcohol abuse. The environment seemed anything but stable. As the years passed, Tim Sr. went through multiple marriages, divorcing Cynthia and marrying Carolyn, with whom he had 2 more sons. By the time Tim was 9, he found himself in a broken family, and as the years went on, he witnessed his father marrying again, this time to a woman called Julie when Jones was 16. Upon his release, Jones met Amber and the two got married. Jones had a strained relationship with his father. This escalated during the Christmas holidays of 2012, leading to 18 months of silence between them. The Christmas holiday of 2012 would be the last time that Jones's father would see the children. The trial commenced on May 15, 2019. Testimonies poured in from various individuals, shedding light on the heinous crime committed by Jones. Law enforcement officials, mental health experts, correctional officers, teachers, school administrators, babysitters, and even Jones's own family members took the stand to present their accounts. From the onset, Jones's guilt was undeniable. He had confessed to the crime and the evidence against him was overwhelming. Despite this, the defense sought to establish that the man was severely mentally ill and thus not entirely responsible for his actions. However, when the jury delivered the guilty verdict, they unequivocally rejected the defense's argument. With guilt established, the focus shifted to determining the appropriate punishment for the murders. During the sentencing phase, the prosecution called on teachers and former babysitters to describe the trauma inflicted upon them by the loss of these innocent children, even though they were not biologically related. Their accounts painted a picture of the impact of Jones's actions on those left behind. The defense did not present experts to bolster their case, but they heavily relied on pleas for mercy from Jones's relatives, who advocated for a life sentence instead of death. Amidst the emotionally charged courtroom, Jones's father and grandmother took to the stand, recounting a disturbed adolescence and adulthood of Jones. Their tearful testimonies, however, firmly opposed the idea of him facing the death penalty. On the following day, Amber Kaiser, the mother of the children and Jones's wife, returned to the stand for a second time in the trial. While her first appearance was marked by tears and visible distress, this time she mustered the strength to request mercy for Jones.
I pray for Tim all the time. I pray for him often. I pray for his family often. I pray for my family. They didn't even have the opportunity to know them. I can't bring myself to want anybody to die.
Despite her own feelings of wanting to inflict harm on him, she acknowledged her children's sentiments and believed that they would not have wanted their father to die.
I hope for mercy for you. I pray for you often. And I say that without excusing what he's done.
She bravely expressed her willingness to accept whatever decision the jury would reach. Solicitor Rick Hubbard, delivered the closing arguments for the state in the penalty phase of the Timothy Jones Jr. murder trial. Hubbard confronted the jury, posing a striking question. Would you reserve death for the worst of the worst? Isn't he, pointing at Tim Jones, the worst of the worst? Tim Jones, a man who brutally murdered his 5 children. As Hubbard continued, he implored the jury to consider the kind of man Jones truly was, a murderer who callously betrayed the trust of his own flesh and blood, robbing them of their precious young lives. Reflecting on Jones's tumultuous childhood, Hubbard acknowledged that amidst the chaos, his family had tried to shield him, recognizing something special in him. Jones's father, despite his own imperfections, had loved his son, and his grandmother had expressed her love for him too, though also recognizing his selfish tendencies. Hubbard highlighted how Jones had learned to manipulate his family, knowing that they would always come to him and apologize, reinforcing a sense of entitlement. Hubbard showed 2 pictures. The first was one of Jones's joyful family, and the second was the children's lifeless bodies wrapped in black garbage bags. Hubbard drove home the point that Jones was responsible for destroying this loving family. He declared, "No father does this to his children." Hubbard highlighted that Jones's choices, not his family history, led to the tragic act of leaving his children's bodies exposed. With a display of crime scene and autopsy photos, Hubbard challenged the jury to confront the reality of Jones's actions. Throughout his closing arguments, Hubbard pressed the jury to contemplate whether a man who committed such an unfathomable act deserved mercy. With the weight of the evidence and the gravity of the crime before them, the jury was left to determine the fate of Jones. Jones's attorney, Casey Secor, passionately appealed to the jury's empathy for the Jones family. He prompted them to consider the family's ongoing suffering and heartache. Secor acknowledged the gravity of Jones's actions, urging a balanced decision that respected both severe punishment and compassion. It took the jury just over 6 hours to find Jones guilty. Despite the gravity of the situation, Jones chose not to testify in his defense during either the guilt or penalty phase. Instead, the courtroom was exposed to a haunting audio confession from 2014 that left no room for doubt. After just an hour and 45 minutes of intense deliberation, the 12-member panel delivered their verdict. The death penalty was not an automatic consequence in this case. The jurors carefully considered any extenuating circumstances before reaching their unanimous decision to condemn Jones to death. All 12 jurors had to be in agreement and signed the verdict form before the judge formally delivered the death sentence. As the Jones family solemnly exited the courthouse, they remained tight-lipped, offering no comment to the press, but this would not be the end of the case. In 2021, 2 years after receiving a death sentence, Jones sought a new trial and the removal of his death penalty, claiming that the exposure to distressing autopsy photos during the original trial prejudiced jurors against him. Lawyer Robert Dudek argued that Jones, who suffers from schizophrenia, was unfairly judged. The defense contended that the inclusion of gruesome autopsy images skewed the sentencing against Jones, and that prosecutors misrepresented the consequences of an insanity plea. These images, taken 9 days after the children's deaths, raised concerns about fairness. The defense also objected to excluding expert witness testimony, challenging Jones's mental health and diagnosis. Solicitor Rick Hubbard defended his decision to include the photos, facing criticism from justices for potentially manipulating the jurors' emotions. The court usually permits strong defense arguments in death penalty cases, but concerns were raised about the trial's handling. However, in March 2023, the South Carolina Supreme Court rejected Jones's appeal. The court acknowledged that 2 errors were made during the trial, but deemed them harmless errors. That didn't warrant overturning the conviction or sentence. The initial mistake was excluding Dr. Adriana Flores' testimony, meant to challenge another doctor's claims about Jones faking mental issues. The court said her input should have been allowed. The second error involved showing disturbing autopsy photos. Despite this, the court noted Jones tried to hide the crime, so the images didn't greatly affect the jurors' death penalty decision.
We, the jury, in the above entitled case, have found beyond a reasonable doubt the existence of the following statutory aggravating circumstances, to wit, 2 or more persons were murdered by the defendant by act or pursuant to one scheme or course of conduct, and the murder of 5 children 11 years of age or younger. Now recommend to the court that the defendant, Timothy R. Jones, Jr., be sentenced to death.
The emotions within Jones's family must have been unimaginable. Losing all 5 children and facing the possibility of Jones's execution must be a heavy burden to bear. The prosecutors and defense attorneys, tasked with debating through the horrors of the case, are surely haunted by the disturbing images and Jones's own confession. And above all, the children's mother, who has endured indescribable pain since that fateful day on August 28, 2014. Would she be able to pick up the pieces and start again? Do you think the death sentence is a suitable punishment for Jones, or should the jury have gone with a life sentence, given Jones's mental health plea?
In July 1981, a 24-year-old mother of 2, Nova Welsh, disappeared without a trace in Birmingham, England. No one knew what had become of her until 3 weeks later, when her decaying body was found inside a storage cupboard in her own home. Detectives launched an investigation, but would not make a breakthrough until 36 years later. Nova's killer was all the while right under their noses. So, who was this individual, and what was their motive for taking Nova's life? Today's case will take us to Birmingham, a city in the metropolitan county of the West Midlands in England. With a population of more than 1 million people, it is the second largest city in the United Kingdom. It's also known as the City of 1,000 Trades, due to its status as the world's first manufacturing town. Birmingham is famous not only for its manufacturing roots, but also well known for its heritage in the world of food and cuisine, legendary rock music, and bustling nightlife. Nova was born in 1957 in Jamaica. She was not an only child, but had a younger sister by the name of Valerie. Nova grew up into a carefree and happy child whom everyone in the neighborhood couldn't help but love. Nova was a lovely person, always happy and smiling, said Nova's best friends Lorna Edmond. When Nova was 10 years old, her mother Lorna Welsh decided to move to the United Kingdom in search of greener pastures. It was quite a tough decision, as it meant she had to leave behind the people and place they had become so familiar with. However, the desire to give her girls the best in life helped her to remain resolved to leave the country. Not long after making the decision, Lorna and her daughters traveled to the UK and began their lives afresh. Life in the United Kingdom was very different from what they were used to, but as time went on, the family adjusted and settled well into their new environment. When Nova was around the age of 16, she met and fell in love with Osmond Bell, a young boy who was also the same age as her. In no time, they both started a romantic relationship. Perhaps Nova was simply blinded by love, or perhaps she only wanted her independence, but a few months down the line, she made known her intention to leave home. She told her mother that she and Osmond had decided to begin living together. It is not clear if Lorna approved of this decision or not, but regardless, Nova eventually moved and went to live with Osmond. 2 years later, Nova and Osmond welcomed their first child. It was a boy, and they named him Jonathan. 4 years later, they had another son, and he was given the name Lee. Nova was a devoted mother to her young sons and loved them wholeheartedly. To provide for themselves as well as their children, the couple took up different jobs. Nova worked as a part-time cleaner, while Osmond was a builder. Life seemed to be going at a pretty good pace, but sadly, things would not stay the same. At some point, the love between Nova and Osmond began to deteriorate. The spark that had been there at the beginning of their relationship gradually faded. The consequence of this was that the couple began to quarrel more frequently. It became common for neighbors to hear the sound of the couple's noisy fights in their apartment located in the Ladywood area. Their disagreements also sometimes escalated into violence, with Osmond hitting her and leaving her with bruises. With each passing day, Nova became increasingly unhappy in her relationship, and she confided in her younger sister Valerie, as well as some close friends, about what she was going through. In the end, she made up her mind to give love a chance with someone else. She told Osmond that she was no longer interested in the relationship, but despite her ending things, Osmond was not ready to let her go. In May 1981, Nova met a man by the name of Wayne Newby, and they both got into a relationship. As their romance progressed, Wayne would sometimes visit her at her home. This did not sit well with Osmond, and it gave him more reasons to fight with Nova. In June 1981, Nova's stepsister, Sonia, visited her for a few days. During this period, Sonia witnessed one of their fights and how ugly it could get. On that particular day, Sonia had been in the living room when she heard a scream from the direction of the kitchen. It was unmistakably Nova's voice, and she quickly ran to the kitchen to find out what was wrong. What she saw alarmed her. Nova was down on the floor, while Osmond stood angrily over her with a dishcloth wrapped around his hands. In the moments that followed, Sonia made it clear that she would call the police, but Osmond tried to stop her from taking this action. When police officers later arrived at the house, they asked what had happened, and Nova was the one who did the explaining. She told them that she and Osmond had been arguing and she wanted him to leave the house. She never told police that the real reason why they had argued was because she had gone out the previous night and Osmond had not been pleased about this. He had confronted her when she got back from her outing, and things had escalated from there, with him grabbing her by the neck and trying to strangle her. After Nova was done talking, officers moved to where Osmond was and spoke to him. He did not argue, but packed his bags and left the house. It was a moment of relief for Nova, and she knew that things would become less heated from that moment. She was right. With Osmond no longer around, she had the freedom to spend more time with her lover, Wayne. There was no longer the worry of having to meet an angry Osmond after getting back from a late-night outing. She also had more reasons to laugh and was generally happier. But as it turned out, Nova's newfound joy would be short-lived. On July 24, 1981, Nova took her two sons, Jonathan and Lee, to stay with their father, Osmond. She had earlier made plans to go dancing with Wayne and some of her friends, and because of this, she did not want to leave her two sons all alone in the house. Apart from this, she also felt like taking them over would be a great way for them to bond with their father. After dropping the boys over at Osmond's place, she made for the club where she and Wayne had agreed to meet. That evening was fun-filled, as she made merry to her heart's content, and with Wayne by her side, she felt once again like a teenager in love. By the time she decided to leave the club, it had already gotten dark. She bade Wayne and their other friends goodbye and left for her apartment. That would be the last time any one of them would see her alive. The following morning, which was July 25, 1981, Nova's neighbors, Carmen and Wendell Turner, who lived in the flat below hers, were awoken by a noise. It was coming from Nova's apartment above, and it was the familiar sound of argument that they had heard many times before. This time around, they could only hear Nova crying. On the evening of that same day, another neighbor saw Nova and would later tell the police that she appeared visibly upset about something. Almost 7 hours later, at around 12:30 a.m., Carmen and Wendell heard a loud bang from above. While contemplating what or who could have made such a noise in the middle of the night, a second bang followed. That particular one sounded like somebody kicked a door. Carmen and Wendell listened for more sound, but it never came. Without any further disturbances, they went to sleep and did not think much of the noise they had just heard until much later. July 27, 1981 was a Monday, and the residents of Birmingham went about their daily activities. However, Nova did not turn up for work on that day, or the day after that. Nobody saw her and had any idea where she was. Around that time, Nova's mother, Lorna, and sister, Valerie, had permanently moved from the United Kingdom to Miami in the United States, and they had hopes that at a later date, Nova would also join them with her two children. Upon getting to Miami, they called Nova but could not reach her. This made them worried. "We were trying to reach her to confirm that we had arrived safely, but we could never get any answer," said Valerie Welsh. Nova's best friend, Lorna, was one of the first people to notice that she was missing. Lorna knew that it was unlike her friend to refuse to pick up the phone and not show up for several days. She, however, believed there was a tangible reason for all that was happening. After thinking things through, she made up her mind to pay Nova a visit to see what was wrong. Upon reaching Nova's apartment, she discovered that the door was locked, and no matter how hard she knocked or called Nova's name, she got no response. She found it all very strange and wondered if her friend had left the country without telling anyone. But something else caught her attention and made her realize that not all was well. Some clothes, which Nova had washed, were hanging on the line. It was unlike Nova to leave her clothes out in the open after they had dried, and this was something Lorna was well aware of. As a last resort, and to confirm her fears, she reached out to Osmond to ask if he had seen Nova, but he told her that he had not, and that their 2 children were with him. With this, Lorna went to the police station and reported that her friend was missing. This was on August 9th, 1981, 2 weeks after Nova disappeared without a trace. Police officers began searching for her immediately. They reached out to her close friends, but none of them had seen her. Osmond was also contacted and asked when he last saw her and why he had not reported her missing earlier. In response, Osmond told them that he thought she had gone off with her new boyfriend or to America with her family. On August 12, 1981, 3 days after Lorna reported Nova missing, she got a letter in her mailbox. At first, she thought it was from a relative. However, after breaking the seal and reading the content, she realized that she was wrong. According to the letter, the boyfriend of whoever had written it had seen Nova fighting with a man she had gone out with around the time of her disappearance. The letter claims that the man had grabbed and hit Nova. Lorna was confused, as she had no idea who had written the letter since the person had chosen to remain anonymous. But going by what she had read, she could decipher that the person was a female. Lorna did not waste time in showing the police the letter. After going through the letters, officers focused their attention on Wayne, since he was the man Nova had been going out with before she had disappeared. However, when Wayne was questioned, he maintains that he had no idea where Nova was or had gone to. On August 18, 1981, the police were called upon by Nova's neighbor to investigate a foul odor that was all over the house. Nobody knew what exactly was smelling, but it was really bad and made everyone uncomfortable. When police officers arrived at the house, they quickly realized that the smell was much stronger in a certain area, and this was upstairs at Nova's flat. They made their way there, and after discovering that the door was locked, they quickly broke it down. The stench grew more intense as they entered the house, and the officers held their hands to their noses and grimaced in disgust as they began their search for the source. The house was in disarray, and dust had settled on the furniture. Cobwebs were also visible on the ceiling, and this showed that no one had been living in the house for some time. There were stairs in the apartment, and under them was a cupboard. Officers were attracted to this part of the house because they noticed that the smell was especially stronger there. Strangely, the lock on the door of the cupboard looked broken, and a piece of chewing gum had been used to hold it in place. When officers finally opened it, they saw the decaying body of the woman that they had been looking for. She wore a nightgown and was covered by a blanket and some papers. It was a very horrifying sight, and the officers could hardly hide their shock. Nova had been rotting inside her own house all along, while the world was searching for her. An ambulance was called to the scene, and Nova's body was taken away for autopsy. The gum that was found on the cupboard door was collected as evidence by the police and stored away. The news of Nova's death soon spread around the neighborhood like wildfire. Her family in Miami were also contacted and informed about what had happened. They were heartbroken and wept for days. The results of the autopsy that was conducted on Nova's body revealed that she had died as a result of pressure on the neck. Detectives immediately launched an investigation to determine how Nova had met her end. The person at the top of the suspect list was Osmond. Detectives felt that there was something fishy about him, and so he was arrested. In the 4 days that he was held in custody, he was made to undergo a series of interrogations, but despite this, detectives got nothing tangible from him. At some point, he was also shown the mysterious letter that Lorna, Nova's friend, had received and was asked if he knew anything about it. He told them that he knew nothing about the letter. Since there was no further reason to continue holding him at the station, he was allowed to go home. After this, detectives continued the investigation and even went as far as asking the public for information regarding Nova's death. But they got nothing, and the case went cold. Nova was soon laid to rest, and life went on. But the pain her death brought stayed on with her family, and for a long time, they wondered who had killed her. Years went by, and the world of forensic science became more sophisticated. Complex DNA techniques that seemed like a pipe dream at the time of Nova's death became possible due to advances in technology. In 2014, detectives decided to take another look at the case. This time, they focused on the chewing gum that had been used to seal the cupboard in which Nova's body was found. The gum had been preserved over the years, and detectives knew it would contain the DNA of whoever had used it to hold the cupboard's door in place. They believed that whoever it turned out to be was likely Nova's murderer. A test was soon run on the gum, and DNA was recovered. Upon further analysis, detectives discovered that it was a match to none other than Osmond. The gum wasn't the only detail that was tested for DNA. The seal of the letter Lorna received back in 1981 was also sent to the lab for testing, and Osmond's DNA was also found on it. This meant only one thing. He had written the letter to divert attention away from himself. With the solid evidence, detectives knew that they had finally cornered Osmond. He was soon arrested and charged with the arrest of his Nova. During subsequent interrogations after the arrest, Osmond maintained his innocence and even gave reasons as to why his DNA was on the gum and letter seal. For the gum, he said that he had been running a laundry business in the past, and he occasionally used the cupboard where Nova's body was found. At some point, long before Nova died, the cupboard lock had been broken, and he had used the gum to hold it in place. For the letter, he claims that he had come into contact with it back in 1981, when he was being interrogated for the murder. What I do remember is being left in a room with a letter and envelope on the table for several minutes. I remember thinking at the time, perhaps I am being observed, and they only came back in after I took the letter up and had a look at it. I read it and left it on the table. Osmond had explained as regards to how his DNA had gotten on the letter. Since Osmond kept insisting that he had no hand in Nova's death, the case eventually went to trial. After 6 weeks of trial, he was cleared of murder, since there was no evidence to show that the killing had been premeditated. However, he was convicted of manslaughter and was sentenced to 12 years in prison. This sentencing was on March 22, 2017. Nova's family were satisfied with the outcome of the trial. Finally, after 36 long years, Nova can rest in peace. The family can now have closure, knowing the person who took Nova's life has been brought to justice, Nova's mother, Lorna, said. Nova's sister, Valerie, also said the family had forgiven Osmond for what he did. We forgive him, but he still needs to pay for what he's done. He never admitted to that, said Valerie. Lorna, Nova's best friend, was also relieved that her killer had been brought to justice. I often think about the old times and the things we used to do. I still miss Nova and only hope that her family can now find peace. Nova can rest in peace knowing that justice has been done. I'll never forget her. Till we meet again, Nova. Love, your friend, Lorna. Nova's case is indeed a sad one, as she never got to see her children grow into adults, but there is the relief that her killer has been finally brought to justice, despite how long it took. But why do you think Osmond refused to own up to the crime even after all the evidence pointed to him as the killer?
Today, the Spokane Police Department announced it has identified the man who killed 9-year-old Candy Rogers in 1959.
It was possibly the most well-known cold case in the city and the entire state.
On the afternoon of March 6, 1959, 9-year-old Candy Rogers left her home in west central Spokane to sell campfire mints in and around her neighborhood. As the hours passed, there was no sign of her return. Despair began to set in for her family as they feared the worst. And then, after 2 grueling weeks and many large-scale efforts to find her, a heart-wrenching discovery was made. Her lifeless body was found deep in the heart of the dense woods, far from the familiar surroundings of her home. Despite a long and tireless investigation by detectives, the mystery surrounding her death remained unsolved for many decades. But eventually, the truth was uncovered over 6 decades later. So, what exactly happened to Candy? Did she get lost in the woods and become prey to a wild animal? Or did she suffer a fate even far worse? Today's case will take us to Spokane, a city located in the state of Washington in the United States. It is known for its rich cultural heritage and natural beauty, making it a popular destination for outdoor enthusiasts. With the Spokane River running through its center, the city offers a thriving downtown area with a plethora of shopping, dining, and entertainment options. The city is also famous for being the birthplace of Father's Day and for hosting the annual Lilac Festival, which celebrates the blooming of the city's signature flower. Candy was born in the year 1950 to parents Elaine and Carl Rogers. Since she was an only child, her parents greatly cherished her. At some point, Elaine and Carl's marriage came crashing down for unknown reasons, and this caused them to get divorced and go their separate ways. However, Candy remained in the care of her mother, who was a schoolteacher at the time. Elaine ensures that she provided for her daughter as best she could. Candy was a popular face in her community, and those who knew her described her as a pleasant and friendly little girl who loved to laugh. By 1959, Candy was 9 years old and was a 4th grader at Holmes Elementary School. Like most girls within her age range, Candy also joined a youth organization known as the Bluebirds. The Bluebirds were younger members of the Campfire Girls, and the organization aims to provide girls with education and recreational activities so as to encourage personal growth, self-reliance, and a connection to nature. Candy got actively involved in the activities of the group, which included camping trips, community services, hiking, and a host of others. She enjoyed every moment and took on every activity with enthusiasm. Candy was growing into a smart and happy girl with a future that looked very bright, and everyone around her could see that. However, no one was expecting that a heartbreaking tragedy would soon take her away and shake the entire community to its core. On March 6, 1959, Candy returned from school to the home she shared with her mother. It was a Friday, and she looked forward to spending time with her friends the following day. However, she also had something else she wanted to do first. The Bluebirds were trying to raise funds for one of their upcoming activities, and as part of the efforts to do so, members were required to sell a variety of chocolates in their neighborhood. Candy had 7 boxes of campfire mints that she planned to sell that day. She asked her mother, Elaine, if she could leave home to do this, and she was given approval. However, Elaine reminded her to not spend too much time outdoors and to return home before dark. It was a rule that Candy had always followed, but Elaine still made sure to remind her of it every time she left home. Had Elaine known that particular day would be different, she would have never let her daughter leave the house. Candy ate a quick snack of an oatmeal cookie and also played with their family dog briefly. Then she grabs the boxes of campfire mints and made her way out of the house. The time was around 4 p.m. There were several girls of her age selling chocolate from door to door that fateful afternoon, and she joins them. Nobody knows what exactly happened afterwards, but Candy never returned home. At around 5:30 p.m., Elaine began to get worried. She knew it was unlike Candy to remain outside this late. As the minutes slowly dragged by, it seemed like hours to Elaine, and she kept listening for the familiar sound of Candy's footsteps approaching the house, but they never came. At around 6 p.m., her anxiety had skyrocketed, and she was sure that something had gone wrong. She quickly informed Candy's grandfather, Stanley Newton, about the situation. Other relatives, friends, and neighbors were also informed that Candy had not returned home, and by 6:30 p.m., a small group of people were out looking for her. They began by asking people around the neighborhood if they knew where she was, and some people confirmed that they had seen her walking around earlier, clutching the boxes of campfire mints she was selling. But nobody seemed to know where exactly she could now be. Around 7 p.m., Candy's grandfather Newton and his friends were almost hit by a speeding car, but managed to jump out of harm's way. The close call left them shaken, but their attention quickly returns to finding Candy as the sky darkened. Despite the difficulties of searching in the fading light, the men held on to hope that Candy would be found safe and sound before nightfall. At some point, the authorities were also notified about the missing girl, and soon, police officers and sheriff's deputies also joined in the search. At around 9 p.m. that same day, a group of searchers came across some boxes of campfire mints. They were found lying across Petite Drive, and many believe that they had been the same boxes Candy had been selling. 6 campfire mint boxes were found that night, but Candy had left home with 7. That night's search proved to be futile. There was no sign of Candy anywhere. Elaine could hardly sleep a wink throughout the night. Many thoughts raced through her mind, and she wondered if her daughter was okay. The uncertainty was just too much to bear, and she silently cried and prayed that Candy would return home safely to her. The following morning was a Saturday, and by then almost everyone in the city had gotten the news that Candy was missing. Well-meaning individuals trooped out in large numbers to begin the search for the day. Officers rode on horseback as well as in vehicles to conduct the search. They looked through the woods and along major roads. The Air Force also assisted in the search by providing a helicopter. The aircraft was boarded by 4 trained personnel as well as 1 pilot, and they took it to the air. While flying over Spokane River, the pilot failed to see a high-tension wire until the last moment and ended up flying into it. The effect was immediate. The helicopter spiraled out of control and crashed into the Spokane River, instantly killing 3 of the 5 men on board. Airman Marlise D. Ray, Sergeant William A. McDonnell, and Lieutenant Kenneth G. Fautek were the 3 men who tragically lost their lives on that day. Everyone who had joined in the search for Candy was saddened by the tragic event, but it did little to discourage them from searching for her. They remained determined and therefore intensified their efforts. None of them wanted the death of the 3 heroes to be in vain. But despite everyone's best efforts, they had no luck locating Candy for several days. It was as if she had simply vanished without a trace. With each passing day that Candy remained missing, Elaine began to look like a shadow of herself. She refused to touch her meals and would constantly stare into space. Not knowing the whereabouts of her only daughter was slowly driving her insane. The burden on her heart was just too much to bear. March 22, 1956 made it 16 days that Candy had been missing, and it was the day she was found. That afternoon, 2 airmen named Howard Lawrence and Richard Bergen were out hunting woodchucks in a wooded area about 7 miles away from Candy's home. Upon getting to a small clearing in the forest, they noticed a small pair of blue suede shoes. The delicate craftsmanship of the shoes and the small size indicated that they belonged to a child. They were baffled and wondered how the shoes had gotten there, so far away from town. After looking around and waiting a while to see if anyone would come out to lay claim to the shoes, they picked them up and made their way back to base. The two men could not stop talking about the discovery they made in the woods, and the news soon spread like wildfire. The shoes were handed over to the police, who contacted Candy's grandfather to see if he could identify them. They had a strong suspicion that the shoes belonged to the little girl they had spent several days searching for. When Candy's grandfather saw the shoes, he told the police officers that they indeed looked similar to the ones she had worn in the past. With this confirmation, officers decided to focus their search on the area where the shoes had been found. Since it had grown dark, conducting a search would be difficult that night, and so they agreed to wait until the next morning. The following day was a Sunday, and by dawn, a team of officers and volunteers had arrived at the clearing where the shoes had been found. They immediately began looking through the area, but initially found nothing. After some time went by, one of the officers suddenly came across a small mound made up of brush and pine needles. He found it strange and decided to take a closer look. To his horror, it did not take him long to see a knee sticking out from under the pile, and he carefully brushed away the leaves to reveal the decomposing body of a child. He instantly recognized her as the little girl they had been looking for. The clothes she was wearing were torn in places, and when the officer looked at her feet, he noticed that they were bound. A torn strip of cloth had been used to do this. Also wrapped around her neck was another strip of clothing. The officer quickly alerted the other searchers, and soon after, the body was taken out of the area for an autopsy. Candy's relatives were immediately contacted and informed about the state in which she was found. Upon hearing that her daughter was dead, Elaine lost consciousness and had to be placed under sedation. More than 1,000 searchers who had volunteered their time, resources, and energy to look for Candy were shocked by the news. There was a general feeling of dread in the air, and from that moment, many people began to fear for their safety as well as their children's. The result of the autopsy that was conducted on Candy's body revealed that she had been abused and then strangled to death. Detectives from the Spokane Police Department immediately began an investigation to find out who the culprit was. "We'll put every available man on the case and keep them there till the thing is solved," Police Chief Clifford Payne had told the media at the time. "We know what we're looking for now. We're looking for a maniac," he added. A lot of individuals were questioned, but detectives were unable to get any helpful information. The first person the authorities suspected of committing the crime was an imprisoned serial killer by the name of Hugh Bion Morse, and they had good reason for believing that he had something to do with it. When the autopsy was conducted on Candy's body, a strange purple smear that smelled like grape gum had been noticed on her clothes, and Morse was known for having a special liking for grape gum. But when he was asked about Candy's murder, he denied any involvement in it. Since there was no evidence to show that he was the killer they were looking for, charges could not be brought up against him. However, he remained a prime suspect in the case for a long time. Apart from him, detectives also investigated several tips that poured in after Candy's death, but none of them proved to be of any use. Candy was eventually laid to rest, and her devastated family members hoped that her killer would be brought to justice sooner than later. But several months went by after this, and the case remained a tough one for detectives to crack. In June 1963, 4 years after Candy's death, her father, Carl, sadly took his own life, unable to cope with losing his daughter. At the time, he had been living in a hotel in Walla Walla. Years went by, and Candy began to fade from the memories of many. But her family and the detectives of Spokane Police Department never forgot. This is the kind of case that's been the giant logjam for cold cases. And in Spokane, I keep saying it's the Mount Everest of our cold cases, the one that we could never seem to overcome. But at the same time, nobody ever forgot. said Detective Zach Stormont of the Spokane Police Department Major Crimes. By 2001, there had been a significant advancement in DNA technology compared to the 1950s, when it was non-existent. Candy's clothes from when her body was found have been carefully stored by the authorities as evidence. These clothes were now submitted to the lab with the hopes that the killer's DNA could be identified. Forensic investigators quickly got to work, and they were able to determine that Candy's underwear had on it. They were able to isolate DNA from this, and it was used to create a DNA profile. It was an exciting period for detectives, as they felt closer than ever to solving the case. The newly developed DNA profile was then uploaded to the database, but unfortunately, no match was found. In 2002, detectives compared the DNA profile to that of Morse, who had remained on their radar for a long time. However, to their disappointment, they discovered that he was not the man they were looking for. Nothing of interest would surface for a long time. In September 2006, Candy's heartbroken mother quietly passed away in her home at the age of 82. She died not knowing who had killed her precious daughter. Around 2017, forensic genetic genealogy came to the limelight as a new scientific method being used to solve several cold cases. The method uses DNA analysis and traditional genealogical methods to solve crimes and identify missing persons. In other words, it combines science with family history research to piece together clues and bring justice to victims and their loved ones. With the method gaining popularity, detectives decided to give it a try and use it in helping them solve Candy's murder. Brittany Wright, a forensic scientist with the Washington State Patrol Crime Laboratory Division, got assigned to the case around the time. She was able to get her hands on a DNA sample that had been stored in the crime lab freezer since 2001. The next thing she did was reanalyze the sample to confirm that it matched the original perpetrator's DNA profile from 2001. Upon confirming this, she followed up with a diagnostic analysis to determine if it could be used for forensic genetic genealogy. The sample was then sent to a private forensic lab. However, this turned out to be a futile effort, as according to the lab, the DNA sample was too degraded to work with. Detectives' hopes were completely dashed when they were given the news, and they could hardly hide their disappointment. A year would go by after this before detectives caught a lucky break. They learned about a particular laboratory that could efficiently work with degraded DNA like the one in Candy's case. The laboratory was known as Othram, and it was located in Texas. Brittany reached out to them to inquire if Candy's case was eligible. Upon receiving a positive response, she then sent off a small amount of the remaining DNA sample for testing. 6 months later, the lab came back with a result. 3 brothers had been identified as the possible suspects. Their names were John, Andrew, and Terry Hoff. As it turned out, all 3 were long dead. Upon further investigation, detectives discovered that one of the men, John, had a daughter named Kathy. They decided to contact her to let her know that they were investigating her dead father. By that point, I had already looked up. A little girl murdered in 1959, so I knew who it was, Kathy said. She provided detectives with a DNA sample which was then analyzed, and the result was astonishing. It revealed that it was 2.9 million times more likely that Kathy's DNA was related to the suspect DNA profile than the general population. With this, detectives became more certain that John was the killer they had spent decades looking for. They did a background check on him and discovered that, in addition to growing up in Spokane, he lived about a mile from Candy's home at the time of her murder. He also had a troubled past. In 1956, at the age of 17, he enlisted in the Army. However, in 1961, 2 years after Candy's death, he was arrested for assaulting a woman. According to reports, he had approached the woman and used force to remove her clothes while she struggled and screamed for help. He then used the clothes to tie her up before trying to strangle her. Luckily, the woman survived the ordeal. For the crime, John spent 6 months in prison, and when he got out, the army labeled him a deserter and discharged him from service. After this, John led a pretty normal life. He worked as a door-to-door salesman and also in a lumber yard to make ends meet. However, at the young age of 31, he ended up taking his own life. Apart from this, detectives also uncovered a possible connection between John and Candy. Hoff's stepsister was a 10-year-old campfire girl at the time of Candy's murder and had taken on the role of Candy's big sister in the program. Detectives believed that this was how John might have known Candy. When detectives uncovered all this about John, they decided to take one final step to confirm that he was Candy's killer. With Kathy's permission as well as a search warrant, they traveled to the cemetery where John was buried and exhumed his corpse. A DNA sample was taken from his remains and was then sent to the lab for testing. The result was what detectives expected. John was Candy's killer. "We got extremely lucky in that we got DNA from 1959, said former Spokane police detectives Brian Hammond, who worked tirelessly on the case till he retired in 2021. They had no concept of that at the time, and that's obviously what cracks the case. Otherwise, I don't believe it would have ever been solved," Hammond added. Some of Candy's surviving relatives were contacted and informed about the breakthrough in the case. It's not closure, but at least there's some form of satisfaction knowing that the person that did it is at least named. He may be in a grave, but he's named, said 77 Joanne Poss, a cousin of Candy. Candy's relatives, however, remained saddened by the fact that her grandparents and parents never got to know who killed her. They never saw him pay or die for it or whatever. They went to their grave not knowing, and that was hard, Joanne said. As for Kathy, the revelation that her father was the murderer shook her to the bones. It's just really sad to find out that someone, not even just your dad, but someone in your family, could do something like that, Kathy said. John passed away when she was only 9, and she grew up believing that he had done it out of depression. And now I think, no, he was evil, she said. It wasn't an escape, in a way, from it, but he got to die with people thinking he was an upstanding man, and he wasn't. Kathy also rendered a public apology for her father's crime and the pain it caused the murdered girl's family. "I'm very, very sorry for what my dad did, that he took her life horribly," she said. "I hope that it gives peace knowing that even though it's not really justice because he doesn't get any punishment, his name has this on it now, and they can know it's solved." Through the act of one man, a family was plunged into misery and remained in the dark for more than 60 years. However, the determination and perseverance of several generations of detectives helped to reveal his identity and bring the bereaved family much-needed closure. But do you think John's murder of Candy was pre-planned, or was it a random act?
For 4 decades, John Bamford waited for justice to prevail. When he kissed his wife, Evelyn, goodbye before leaving for work, little did he think he'd return to a scene that changed his life forever. When he returned, the home he shared with her was cordoned off by police tape while officers searched the surrounding area. Not knowing what was happening, John walked in to find his home in disarray and the bed he once shared with his wife soaked in blood. The only questions were, why did this happen, and who could have done this? Our case today takes us to Miramar, Florida. It's the perfect slice of paradise with tropical weather and pristine beaches. The city's motto, Beauty in Progress, has allowed it to maintain its laid-back beach resort charm while still being a progressive urban city. Visitors also get to enjoy a myriad of outdoor activities and soak up the Florida weather at its best. In 1980, Evelyn Marie Fisher Bamford called Miramar home. Born on March 23, 1947, Evelyn was raised alongside her brother Leonard by parents Charles and Ethel. The family lived in Sardis, a small community in the city of Chilliwack, British Columbia. Evelyn and her family were part of the Chactun First Nations tribe. She attended Chilliwack Secondary School and aspired to be a nurse. Her cousin, Stephen Point, described her as the starlight of the family. Evelyn was also a very intelligent young woman. She went on to graduate from the Riverview School of Psychiatric Nursing and began pursuing her career. She was a groundbreaker who paved her own way despite all the obstacles Indigenous people, and women in particular, faced at the time, said Point. Evelyn began working as a nurse in Vancouver soon after graduating, and it was here she would meet her future husband, John. On a night out with friends in 1969, Evelyn met John, who was a bartender at a local pub in Port Moody, British Columbia. The two had an instant connection. After a year of dating, though, he was offered a job as a beverage manager in the Grand Cayman Islands. The offer was too tempting to pass up, and with Evelyn's blessing, he left to begin his new post. However, the distance became too much, and after 6 months, Evelyn quit her job and joined John. They lived blissfully together for just over a year, but soon Evelyn started to feel the isolation of island living. Evelyn loved John, but she also enjoyed being an independent woman. She found herself needing to return to work, and so she left for Miami. Unable to be without her, John followed her 3 days later, and the couple decided to settle in Miramar, a suburb in Miami. They moved into a newly developed mobile home park called Haven Lake Estates, and it wouldn't be long before they were married. Both John and Evelyn settled into married life and work. They hadn't thought of starting a family just yet, though. After a few years of living alone together, they welcomed into their home a close friend of Evelyn's who had become their new housemate. Together, they lived in blissful harmony. John knew he had found his soulmate in Evelyn. "The first time I saw her, I fell for her, you know. She was just great to be around," he said. For almost a decade, the couple would call Lake Haven Estate their home. But it was here their peaceful existence came to a brutal end. On the evening of January 22, 1980, John kissed 32-year-old Evelyn goodbye and headed to work. Their housemate had also left to go out that evening. Evelyn was home alone, nothing out of the ordinary. She went about doing some everyday chores before retiring to bed for the night. She'd recently undergone knee surgery and was still in the process of recovering. At around midnight, her friend returned home. She'd forgotten her key and tried knocking on the door to wake Evelyn. After a while of getting no response, she started to panic. She called the police. When police eventually broke the door to enter the home, they walked into a scene straight out of a horror movie. The house was in disarray, and it was deathly silent inside. Police made their way to the back bedroom, and there they found Evelyn. She lay dead in her bed, bludgeoned to death, her blood soaking through the mattress. Autopsy reports later revealed that she'd been brutally raped before being murdered. Investigators discovered a window that had been forced open and surmised that the killer may have gained entry and escaped through the same window. Following the direction of the killer's possible escape route, police discovered that it led to a turnpike that connected to a main road out of the area. Soon after police arrived, crime scene investigators began collecting evidence before Evelyn's body was taken to the mortuary. Her husband John did not receive a call from police after they discovered Evelyn's body. What he recalls was finding police tape stuck across the door and a few police officers canvassing the area. In a daze, he entered the house and discovered the furniture and cushions were out of place. He continued to the bedroom he shared with Evelyn and found half their king-size bed had been soaked through with blood. John would be the first to be questioned. It was normal police procedure to question the spouse in a situation like this, and he was the closest thing she'd had to family, as hers were over 4,000 miles away in Chilliwack. John explained the night's events to investigators, leading up to the moment he arrived home to find it had become a crime scene. After he provided an alibi, he was allowed to go home. John continued to be cooperative with police, as he too wanted justice for his wife's murder. Police continued their investigation with the help of John and their friends. They interviewed multiple people and came to the conclusion that neither Evelyn nor John had any enemies that would want to harm either of them. In the meantime, police collected DNA from the crime scene and bagged evidence that they hoped could one day be used to find the killer. Although DNA testing was still in its infancy in the early 1980s, the technology was advancing rapidly. Detectives knew there was a possibility that something could be used at a later date to help pinpoint the culprit. Until then, though, it was going to be a waiting game. With no suspects, a cloud of suspicion loomed over John. When he'd taken Evelyn's body back home to Sardis, many people blamed him for her death, some even going as far as accusing him of her murder. The guilt he'd already been experiencing was compounded by the accusations. Evelyn's funeral service took place at St. Mary's Catholic Church in her hometown on February 2, 1980. She was laid to rest at the Chacton Reserve Cemetery. 3 months passed before any new information surfaced. Then, in 1980, Miramar Police Department received a call regarding a similar crime that occurred in neighboring Volusia County. An arrest warrant had been issued for rape and attempted murder, and the circumstances were eerily similar to that of Evelyn's case. When police dug a bit deeper into the suspect's background, they were shocked to discover that he'd been living just 12 houses away from Evelyn and John. Ronald Eugene Richards had also been a resident at Haven Lake Estates and lived just down the line of houses from Evelyn. Richards did not know or interact with the couple while he'd stayed in the mobile home park, but he was no stranger to the law. In 1980, he was also 32 years old and throughout his adult life had been in and out of police custody for several crimes. During the time he was living at the estate, Richards was on parole for a voluntary manslaughter charge from 1975 that occurred in Ohio involving a former girlfriend. The similarities between the crimes in Volusia and Miramar were undeniable, but it was only circumstantial, and without physical evidence, they could not bring any charges against Richards. Although police were sure that Richards was responsible for the murder of Evelyn, they needed solid evidence that could link him to the crime. Frustrations grew as the years went by, and investigators would often look back at the case file, searching for something new that could pin Richards to the murder and give the family the answers they needed. Years would turn into decades, and soon Evelyn's case, although not forgotten, would turn into Broward County's oldest unsolved case. It soon became clear that Evelyn was not the only victim of the crime. John, too, spiraled out of control, consumed by drugs and alcohol. The guilt of Evelyn's death was a constant reminder of his failure to protect her, as he'd sworn to do in his wedding vows. In interviews with reporters, he said that Evelyn's murder changed his character. From that moment to today, I've been a different person altogether, because it changed the way I look at life. It changed how I feel about other people because I was very trusting before. Now I'm not, he said. After some time, though, he realized he could no longer drown his guilt in alcohol and drugs and made a drastic change. John eventually cleaned himself up and moved to England permanently. However, he never forgot Evelyn. Evelyn's family, too, would suffer. Both her parents, Charles and Ethel, would pass away without knowing the true identity of their daughter's murderer. In 2012, her brother Leonard died as well. They were all buried at the Chacton Reserve Cemetery near Evelyn. Over the years, advancements in DNA research led to the closure of many cold cases. Detectives who had been working on Evelyn's case periodically retested the evidence they collected in hopes of finding new evidence in her case. When Miramar Police Detective Jonathan Zeller took over the case, he too wanted to solve the mystery that surrounded Evelyn's brutal slaying. He had been a little boy during the height of the investigation, and growing up in Miramar, he always knew the details of the case. Although he had other cases to solve, he was especially drawn to Evelyn's case. When he could, he followed up on every lead. In 2022, they finally had a breakthrough. Newer technology allowed the old DNA samples to be retested, and investigators could now confirm that Ronald Eugene Richards was, indeed, responsible for the murder of Evelyn Marie Fisher Bamforth. It wasn't hard to find Richards. In 1981, he was charged and found guilty of the rape and attempted murder that occurred in Volusia County in March 1980, and sentenced to 50 years in prison, according to the Florida Department of Corrections. However, he was being held on charges for a parole violation in Ohio related to his initial crime in 1975. On November 30th, 2022, a grand jury indicted Richards, now age 75, on the charges of sexual battery and murder for allegedly killing Evelyn Marie Fisher Bamforth. He now awaited extradition to Broward County to face charges for Evelyn's murder. Police believe that Richards might possibly be a serial killer and are investigating other cases he may be connected to. Miramar Police Division spokesperson Tanya Ruse said they were now one step closer to obtaining justice for Evelyn. As a result of developments in DNA know-how and the diligence and arduous work of Detective Jonathan Zeller, Ronald Eugene Richards has been indicted for sexual battery and homicide. Ruse added that Evelyn's case is now the oldest case solved in Miramar's history. Speaking at the press conference, Detective Zeller said it had been a whodunit case from the beginning. Finding Evelyn's killer was not only rewarding for him, but for all involved. It was a good feeling, he said, being able to solve the decades-old murder. Both Ruse and Zeller commended John Bamforth on his cooperation throughout the investigation and his search for justice. Bamforth told us he wanted justice. His life was never the same after that, said Zeller. Evelyn's cousin, Stephen Point, said her death devastated the Chactun First Nation, and it was a relief to know someone had been charged. To have this news all these years later, my thought that it's too bad Uncle Charlie and Aunt Ethel weren't alive to get this news, he said. Following the news, the family released a statement to Global News stating that she is now peacefully resting with her parents Charles and Ethel and her brother Leonard. Our family hopes all murdered Indigenous women's families receive justice someday, and that they don't have to wait for decades for closure or for the case to go cold to be solved. Our Auntie Evelyn was a beautiful, bright, fun, loving, and caring daughter, sister, aunt, and friend. Following the announcement of Richard's indictment, John Bamforth finally spoke out after 43 years. In a video call, he said that all he wanted was justice for Evelyn. I had a lot of guilt at the time because I wasn't home when I should have been, he said. He went on to describe Evelyn as the calmest person he ever met. Everybody loved her. She was just great to be around. I never had any regrets about being with her. It gave him a sense of relief knowing Richards had finally been charged. I'm not a vindictive person, but I certainly want to see justice for Evelyn, he said. For John, however, there will never be closure. I don't believe in this closure thing. One never has closure, as far as you can tell. But certainly, justice for Evelyn is the most important thing. Ronald Richards' actions were undeniably selfish and senseless. Not only did he end the life of a woman who had everything to live for and could have possibly made a difference in many lives, he also tore apart several families through his evil deeds. Since the 1980s, Richards has spent the majority of his life behind bars, and with the new indictment, he will surely never taste freedom again.
On February 25, 1984, 19-year-old Donna D. Machow's life was mercilessly stolen and her remains were callously discarded in a shallow grave. For nearly 40 years, the truth behind this heinous crime remained shrouded in darkness, until another woman became the target of the killer. Why did it take nearly 4 decades to solve the case? What was the evidence that finally cracked it? East Windsor is a township located in Mercer County, New Jersey. Situated in the central part of the state, it is known for its suburban character and proximity to major cities like Trenton and Princeton. East Windsor offers a blend of residential areas, commercial centers, and natural landscapes. The township is home to various parks, recreational facilities, and cultural attractions, providing residents and visitors with ample opportunities for outdoor activities and community engagement. But despite this idyllic setting, this place would become the home of a heinous crime. Donna D. Machow's journey began on October 16, 1964, in the town of East Windsor, nestled within Mercer County. She was the cherished daughter of Betty Lou Thompson Machow and Ronald Wayne Machow. As the years went by, Donna's family expanded with the arrival of her younger sister, Julie Machow, in 1969. Life took a turn when their mother, Betty, found love again and married a man named Garland. Together they formed a blended family. Donna and Julie embraced their new life with their beloved stepfather by their side. Donna Machow had a zest for life that radiated through her love for cooking and sewing. Alongside her job as a legal secretary, she harbored dreams of a career in modeling. For Julie, Donna was a shining star. Despite the challenges that came her way, Donna never lost her sparkle and continued to embrace life with open arms. Little did she know that her path would take an unexpected and tragic turn, forever altering the lives of those who cherished her. On February 25, 1984, it seemed like a typical Saturday night for 14-year-old Julie Machow, who was relaxing at her family's home in East Windsor. When she noticed her 19-year-old sister, Donna D. Machow's car parked outside, she joined her in the basement. Together they spent the night watching scary movies until 2 a.m. At that point, Julie went upstairs to her bed, ready to rest for the night. Their mother Betty and stepfather Garland were peacefully asleep upstairs during that time. They were unaware of any unusual sounds or disturbances emanating from the basement. The following day, on February 26, 1984, Donna was expected to go to work at a law firm, so her absence during the day didn't initially raise alarm bells. However, as dinner time arrived and Donna still hadn't returned home, her mother began to worry. Concerned for her daughter's well-being, Betty decided to investigate by venturing downstairs to check the basement apartment. As Betty entered Donna's usually neat and organized apartment, she was greeted by a disarray of items scattered about. It was evident that a struggle had taken place within those walls. The sight of blood-stained clothes heaped together heightened her growing unease, prompting her to immediately contact the police. Once the police arrived at the scene, they meticulously combed through the entire basement, their eyes keenly scanning for any trace that could unravel the mystery. Their diligence paid off when they discovered faint fingerprints near a table close to the bed. Recognizing the potential significance of these fingerprints, they carefully collected them as evidence, alongside the blood-stained clothes. They also uncovered traces of bodily fluid in the bedroom, an essential clue that held the promise of leading them closer to the identity of the perpetrator and help in finding Donna. In the search for answers, investigators made a grim discovery. In March 1984, when they found Donna Machow's abandoned blood-stained car near a sewer plant roughly a mile away from her home. However, despite this lead, the mystery surrounding her disappearance endured. Investigators meticulously combed through countless records. They diligently interviewed the residents living in the vicinity of Donna Machow's residence, determined to unearth any clue that could lead them to the truth. As fate would have it, the investigation took a significant turn when they suspected a number of people, including Nathaniel Harvey, a former worker at a nearby farm and resident of East Windsor. He had been apprehended and detained for his alleged involvement in a series of assaults and a chilling murder in the Plainsboro area. But all the leads, including Harvey, did not pan out at that time. The significant piece of evidence, the bodily fluid that investigators found in Donna Machow's bedroom, also went for testing. However, the technology for DNA testing was not as advanced as it is today, and the testing conducted at that time lacked the precision needed to pinpoint the source of the bodily fluid. But the investigators didn't close the case and hoped that one day they would come up with some solid leads that would help them solve Donna Machow's murder mystery. The weight of the tragedy became too much for Donna's stepfather. who tragically passed away just 6 months after Donna vanished, leaving the family to bear the weight of their grief alone. The family went to great lengths in their search for the killer. They hired private investigators, trackers, and even sought the help of psychics. They poured all their resources into the effort, spending every last penny they had. Their hope never wavered. They held on to the belief that somehow, maybe, just maybe, their loved one was still alive. They couldn't shake the thought that perhaps she was injured. After exhausting all possible avenues to finding the identity of the killer, seeking solace and a fresh start, Julie and her mother made the difficult decision to move to Texas in 1987. However, their journey to healing was further marred by misfortune when their storage unit was burglarized, robbing them of precious memories. The thieves callously snatched away family photos, cherished mementos, and 16 boxes filled with investigation files, adding another layer of pain. 11 years went by, but there was no news. But on April 2, 1995, police officers got a call from a Boy Scout troop about a body they found near Cranberry. It was not in good condition, almost completely decomposed, but when they got the dental records back, they couldn't believe they had found the most important part of the puzzle they had been searching for the last decade. It was the body of Donna D. Machow, concealed within a carpet in a wooded area near a cranberry farm, not far from where her car had been recovered. After her remains were sent for an autopsy, initial findings indicated that Donna had tragically suffered a gunshot wound to the head. However, as the case investigation progressed, the dedicated experts at the Middle Assault Regional Medical Examiner's Office delved deeper into her remains. Through careful examination, they discovered that her cause of death was indeed a head injury, although it couldn't be definitively determined as a gunshot wound. Nevertheless, the cause of death was amended to evidence of homicidal violence, and her death continued to be classified as a homicide. With this crucial lead unable to yield conclusive results, the investigation gradually reached a standstill, and the case eventually fell into the abyss of unsolved mysteries. In February 2022, Mercer County Prosecutor Angelo Onofre directed the reopening of the Donna Machow case. The case was handed over to the Office of Public Integrity and Accountability Central Regional Cold Case Task Force, a dedicated group within the statewide cold case network established by the New Jersey Attorney General in 2019. As part of the reopened investigation, all relevant physical evidence, including DNA samples, was carefully resubmitted to the state police's Central Regional Laboratory. This step aimed to leverage advanced forensic techniques and technology in the pursuit of truth and justice. Modern DNA technology played a crucial role in shedding new light on the case. The evidence, the bodily fluid which was found from Donna Machow's bedroom, was carefully re-examined, and it conclusively matched the DNA profile to Nathaniel Harvey. Astonishingly, his DNA was the only genetic material found in the room that should not have been present, according to the Attorney General's office. It was a breakthrough that provided clarity and closure to the long-standing mystery. Nathaniel Harvey, born in 1942 in East Windsor, had a troubled past right from the beginning. He had a knack for trouble and found himself behind bars for most of his life. In 1968, he got married, but the identity of his wife is not known. Living in East Windsor, Harvey had a long list of crimes to his name. He was also described as a daring intruder by the West Windsor police, and he had been convicted of assault. It was said that during his crimes, Harvey would sneak into unlocked homes, where he would take young women hostage and commit acts of violence. The authorities always had their eyes on him, considering him a potential suspect in their search for justice. One such case was of Irene Schnapps, who was also a resident of East Windsor. During the years of 1984 and 1985, the local authorities were faced with a growing concern as a series of burglaries rattled Plainsboro, West Windsor, and nearby neighborhoods. The authorities were also grappling with the unsolved murder of Irene Schnaps and the perplexing disappearance of Donna Machow, who vanished from her family's East Windsor home. 16 months after Donna Machow's disappearance, tragedy struck again in East Windsor when Irene Schnaps, a 37-year-old woman who had recently lost her husband to cancer, was killed. The incident occurred overnight on Saturday, June 15, 1985, or in the early hours of the following day. Concerned for her well-being, one of Irene's colleagues at RCA Americom went to her apartment the next morning on June 16, 1985, on Research Way after she failed to show up for work. With trembling hands, he informed the police about the tragic scene that he had encountered. Inside the apartment, a heart-wrenching sight awaited the investigators. Irene Schnapp suffered a barrage of over 15 vicious blows to her head, inflicted by an axe or hatchet. The room bore gruesome evidence of the tragedy, with Irene's lifeless body lying unclothed in her blood-soaked bedroom. Amidst the chilling scene, a crimson-stained footprint on a pillowcase was discovered, becoming a vital clue that held the potential to unlock the mystery behind her tragic demise. Peter Stowasser, a 41-year-old man, stepped forward to share his account with the investigators. As a friendly acquaintance of Irene Schnaps, he revealed that he may have been the last person to have seen her alive. Shortly after sharing his connection to Irene Schnaps, Stowasser's life took an unexpected turn. The police began frequent visits to his doorstep, and one Saturday, June 17, 1985, Stowasser found himself taken to the Middle Assault Prosecutor's Office, where he spent the entire day under intense scrutiny, facing a barrage of questions regarding Irene's tragic murder. He confessed to developing feelings of attraction towards her, envisioning a potential romantic connection. However, Irene, still grieving the loss of her husband, expressed the need for time and space before considering any new relationships. As Stowasser eagerly anticipated the right moment to express his romantic feelings, he maintained a friendly connection with Irene. He extended invitations to his lively gatherings, hosting barbecues for neighbors and friends, in an effort to ensure she didn't feel alone. However, their potential relationship was abruptly shattered when Irene met her tragic end, casting suspicion upon Stowasser as the primary suspect. Law enforcement also obtained a search warrant for Stowasser's residence. During the search, they discovered a quilt that bore suspicious-looking stains, possibly blood-related. Additionally, from his car, investigators seized a pair of white work gloves and a metal strip exhibiting reddish spots. Upon conducting tests on the quilt, it was revealed to contain human blood, accompanied by hairs that seemed to match those of the victim. Stowasser, however, maintained that the stains on the quilt originated from menstrual blood belonging to another woman he was involved with. As the investigation progressed, Stowasser underwent a lie detector test, which he did not pass, although the results of such tests were not considered admissible in court. Additionally, it came to light that he had a history of serving time in jail for stalking a former girlfriend. However, the police eventually eliminated Stowasser as a primary suspect, largely due to a significant discrepancy in shoe sizes. Stowasser wore size 12 shoes, whereas a bloody footprint at the crime scene indicated a size 6 shoe. This unexpected mismatch in foot size shifted the focus of the investigation elsewhere. However, on October 28, 1985, the breakthrough in the case occurred. On that very day, Nathaniel Harvey embarked on a rampage through the southern part of West Windsor, ultimately leading to a significant turning point in the investigation. The initial call that reached the dispatch center reported an alarming incident in Dutch Neck Estates. It was a chilling account of a 13-year-old girl who had narrowly escaped an attempted abduction from her own home, and the man covered her mouth in an attempt to take her away. However, her bravery prevailed as she managed to free herself and let out a piercing scream, alerting her parents to the danger. Startled by the commotion, he fled the scene. After fleeing the home in Dutch Neck Estates, that man broke into another house, probably to hide from the police. He was confronted by the homeowner. He turned on the light and saw Nathaniel Harvey standing there threatening him with an axe. Sensing the imminent danger, Harvey swiftly pivoted, shattering the glass door with a powerful swing of the axe, and ran off into the woods. With a chilling affinity for axes, Harvey had developed a disturbing pattern of wielding these menacing tools to instill fear in his victims. Even when armed with a knife during one of the assaults he committed, he deceitfully claimed to possess an axe, further fueling the terror. It wasn't lost on the astute law enforcement officials that the murder weapon used in the Irene Schnapp's killing was believed to be an axe, adding another haunting connection to Harvey's modus operandi. A short time later, investigators diligently canvassed the area, and their sharp eyes caught sight of Harvey traversing a soybean field, and then ran off into the woods. The police swiftly descended upon the scene, converging on Harvey's location near the Princeton Arms shopping center. It was there at the intersection of Old Trenton Road and Dorchester Drive that a state trooper apprehended Harvey. During questioning, police learned of the extent of Harvey's one-man crime spree. He confessed to a string of burglaries that had struck fear into the community. However, the extent of his depravity became even more harrowing as it revealed the details of a recent assault. Prior to the tragic murder of Irene, Harvey had abducted a young girl from East Windsor, forcefully taking her to an abandoned building nestled along Dutch Neck Road. He revealed that the victim, who was actually Donna Machow, innocently stepped out onto her deck to indulge in a cigarette, only to be seized by his relentless grip. After Harvey's arrest, the 13-year-old girl was called to identify if Harvey was the man who attacked her on October 28, 1985. Through her courageous testimony, she ultimately identified Harvey as her assailant. The authorities made a difficult decision not to pursue charges in the case due to the extremely brutal and perverse nature of the attack, considering the potential impact it would have on the victim's well-being. However, a breakthrough came when investigators finally received the search warrant and conducted a thorough search of Harvey's car in November 1985, which was located in the Princeton Arms apartment complex. Inside, they uncovered compelling evidence directly linking him to the Irene Schnapp's murder. Alongside stolen items from various recent burglaries, a significant discovery was made: a Seiko watch that was positively identified as belonging to Irene and having been taken from her apartment at the time of the tragic murder. This crucial find provided a solid connection between Harvey and the crime. In an intriguing twist, it was discovered that Harvey's wife resided in the same apartment complex as Irene. However, this information had to be kept confidential due to his wife's reliance on state assistance. Additionally, authorities asserted that Harvey initially admitted to the murder of Irene during his questioning at the West Windsor Police Headquarters, where he was confronted with various matters. It was during this intense moment that Harvey requested to speak with his father, who offered him crucial advice to do the right thing. In a surprising turn of events, Harvey then made a confession regarding the Irene Schnapp's murder. Following Harvey's apprehension, the quilt that had been seized from Stowasser, the neighbor of Irene, who was also seen as a person of interest in the murder, was returned to him. Additionally, the glove and metal strip confiscated from his car underwent testing by prosecutors, revealing negative results for the presence of blood. In 1986, Harvey was convicted for the murder of Irene Schnaps. However, 4 years later in 1990, the state Supreme Court overturned his conviction, stating that his confession had been obtained without properly informing him of his Miranda rights. Harvey, who now maintained that his confession was coerced, immediately retracted his statement. This turn of events raised concerns about the validity of his initial confession and ignited a debate about whether he should have been reminded of his Miranda rights after speaking with his father. The question of Harvey's confession became a point of contention as conflicting accounts emerged. According to Evan Kleiner, the attorney of Harvey, he denied confessing to the murder of Irene, contradicting the police's assertion that he had admitted to the crime, even though the confession was not recorded. The initial conviction was overturned, based on the court's ruling that Harvey should have been reminded of his Miranda rights after requesting to speak to his father during questioning. In 1994, as the case went to a second trial, the focus shifted to the crucial evidence of blood found at the crime scene. The prosecution presented DNA evidence that revealed genetic traits matching both Harvey's blood sample and the stains on a box spring in Irene Schnaps' apartment. The DNA testing, although still in its early stages, indicated that Harvey could not be ruled out as a contributor. To further strengthen their case, prosecution experts utilized dot intensity analysis, a technique that estimated the consistency between the blood characteristics found at the scene and Harvey's DNA. They determined that such a match would occur in only 1 out of every 1,400 African American individuals. However, the defense experts countered, arguing that the ratio could potentially be as low as 1 in 50. This time Harvey was convicted and received the death sentence. However, this verdict was upheld by a divided state Supreme Court in 1997, with some justices expressing differing views. Justice Alan B. Handler, in his dissenting opinion, carefully scrutinized the 64-page analysis of the DNA testing presented in the case. He voiced his doubts and expressed confidence that at some point in the future, either the state or federal court would likely reverse the decision. In a surprising turn of events, according to an article in the New York Times on May 15, 2005, Kleiner, the attorney of Harvey, pointed a finger of accusation at Peter Stowasser, a former neighbor of Irene. Although Stowasser was once considered a possible suspect by the police, he was subsequently ruled out. Kleiner implicated Stowasser, who was now 61 years old and residing in Hightstown, in both the Irene case and the murder of Donna Machow from East Windsor, who went missing in 1984 and whose body was discovered in 1995. These claims made by Kleiner garnered significant attention, making headlines in the New Jersey section of the Sunday New York Times. He also strongly disputed the accuracy of the blood DNA evidence presented during Harvey's second trial, claiming it to be flawed and contaminated. Additionally, he demanded further DNA testing on other pieces of evidence collected in the case, suggesting that they could have implicated Stowasser instead. Kleiner raised concerns about missing evidence, including the absence of hair from the quilt. He expressed suspicion regarding the classification of the retrieved hair, noting that it was initially labeled as Caucasian and later had the phrase, "and one Negroid hair." Kleiner alleged that all the hair evidence, technician's notes, and microfilm have mysteriously vanished, leading him to believe that the hair evidence never actually existed. Capsack, who continued to serve as a prosecutor in Middle Assault County, expressed unwavering confidence in Harvey's conviction, firmly asserting that Stowasser played no part in the crime. According to Capsack, Stowasser was initially considered as a possible suspect in the case, but he was ultimately eliminated as a prime suspect. The decisive factor was the discovery of a size 6 bloody sneaker print on the victim's pillow, which contradicted Stowasser's size 12 foot. Interestingly, the article failed to mention that Harvey himself wore a size 6 sneaker. However, he clarified that Stowasser's involvement was merely circumstantial and not indicative of his guilt. In April 2007, Judge John F. Malone of the State Superior Court made a decision that dashed Harvey's hopes for a new evidentiary hearing and dismissed his habeas corpus challenge. He overturned Harvey's 1994 conviction, originally a death sentence, due to inadequate legal assistance provided to him during the early 1990s. Despite this development, Harvey, 65 years old, would still serve a 70-year sentence for a separate charge. The death sentence he received in 1994 had been reduced to life in prison without parole when New Jersey abolished capital punishment in 2007. Prior to this abolition, Harvey had spent 20 years on death row, although the state had not carried out an execution since 1963. However, late in November 2020, Harvey died in the State Woods State Prison in Bridgeton, which eventually closed all the doors of any further investigation. Peter Stowasser was considered a suspect in the murder of Donna Machow. The remains of Machow were found in 1995, approximately a mile away from the location of the Irene crime scene. It was claimed that Machow and Stowasser were both enrolled in classes at Mercer County College during the fall of 1983. It was pointed out that after Machow went missing, Stowasser did not attend the spring session classes that he had previously registered for. However, Stowasser maintains that although he attended Mercer County College, he had no knowledge of Machow or any connection to her. Harvey also was connected to Donna Machow, as the discovery of Donna's remains was in a wooded area near the farm where Harvey had briefly been employed, which raised suspicion. Adding to the puzzle was the finding of her abandoned car near a sewer plant conveniently within walking distance of Harvey's residence. These curious circumstances were enough for authorities to focus their attention on Harvey, exploring the possibility of his involvement in the case. Finally, in the last week of April 2023, New Jersey Attorney General Matthew J. Platkin announced that the conclusive identification as the person responsible for the assault and murder of Donna Machow. The state's Attorney General said the case was finally cracked when investigators took a fresh look at this decades-old mystery. Colonel Patrick Callahan, superintendent of the New Jersey State Police, said that as 4 decades have passed, the memory of a young life cruelly taken away still lingers, haunting the hearts of those who loved her. The predator responsible callously discarded her remains in a shallow grave, leaving them undisturbed for over a decade. However, time cannot extinguish the burning desire for justice. Even though the perpetrator met his fate behind bars, serving time for another heinous crime, and ultimately passing away in 2020, it does not diminish the significance of this long-awaited resolution. We commend the relentless efforts of the Central Regional Cold Case Task Force and the dedicated state police forensic scientists who hopefully have brought a modicum of solace to the victim's grieving family after all these years. The determination and dedication of law enforcement and forensic experts serve as a reminder that the pursuit of justice knows no time limit. What are your thoughts on this case? Share your opinion in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating true crime stories.